What is up, everybody? We have made it to another Sunday, the first Sunday after the first round of the first ever 12-team college football playoff. And look, I know there's some people out there that are let down by the games, maybe let down by the teams that are in, but don't worry. We're going to pick you up on a Sunday here. We got the remedy for you. David Cohn, former Michigan quarterback. My brother, Blaine Crane, former Western State, Colorado wide receiver. Blaine, I'll start with you. Just in a very short summation, or, one phrase or even one word, describe yesterday and really the first round of the college football playoff to me.
Sucked. It sucked. It was 4 terrible football games. I guess the Clemson, somewhat Texas game got close. Is this what the committee wanted? No, absolutely not. If you're a sports fan, if you're a college fan, is this what you wanted? No, but sometimes in sports this happens. You look at the NFL, you can see point margin there. Do I expect certain teams to show up better than they did? Yeah. Especially when we can walk down the Tennessee route. I know we're going to talk about that. But, it just wasn't great, in my opinion. It wasn't a lot of close games. But sometimes in sports, you just have blowouts. And sometimes you want the underdog to be good. Sometimes they're not. And I think you saw that with all the favorites basically covering the spread.
What do you think, Coney?
Well, look, the inaugural weekend of the 12-team playoff should have been cause for celebration. We got top teams from each conference playing each other in home environments. And instead, I'll tell you, I think the real winner this weekend was the NFL, but not because the games weren't close. We see blowouts in playoff games every single year in college. I see blowouts in the playoffs every year in the NFL. For most of my life, Super Bowl games have been lopsided. It's not because of that. It's because I don't think college football fans have the patience to deal with an expanded playoff to create the type of parity that the sport needs. And all of this infighting between conferences and fans and networks, it's all really good for the NFL. Now, I hope that I'm wrong, because I hope this is just like a healthy display of passion, right, that we saw on social media and saw on all the networks. But you have to understand, like, the average college football fan doesn't love all of college football. They just love their one team. And the NFL doesn't really have that problem because of fantasy football. Everyone is engaged with their fantasy football roster, every player across every team. And I can just sort of see the writing on the wall here. We used to have standalone bowl games, and everyone loved those, right? It was a great time, but we had multiple national champions in the same year, like Nebraska and Michigan. People hated that. So we moved to a BCS system where the computer decided. Auburn, 2004, goes undefeated. Everyone hates that. Last year, when we have a playoff system, the committee says, I'll play the bad guy. I'll put Alabama in so we have a better Rose Bowl matchup, which is exactly what we got. Everyone hated them. And this year, they triple it in size and say, well, certainly everyone's going to be happy when we have 12 teams, right? No one's going to be disappointed. And we've seen more vitriol this weekend than we have ever before. So I think that what they're going to do is go to 16, and they're going to say, we're just going to create some participation trophy spots so that everyone can get in, everyone can be happy. And then they're probably going to take the home field games away from us and say, well, that was just too advantageous and the weather was too cold. We're going to move them back to the NFL stadiums. So the NFL owners will win, the NFL will win, Roger Goodell will win, all because college football fans can't be grateful.
Yeah, and look, I think the answer to me, if you're just a college football fan in general, maybe not someone that is unbelievably locked into the sport at all times, but just enjoys it overall, I think the answer is somewhere in the middle. Back to what Blaine said, in sports, blowouts happen, but the odds of them happening in every single game that we had in this first round, I think, doesn't speak to coincidence or doesn't speak to, just a random draw of the ball out of the lottery bucket. And we've said this, and I've said it for multiple weeks. I think structurally, the way we picked the 12 is unbelievably flawed. I think it's incredibly flawed, and that showed its head every single time you turned a game on this weekend. Now, does that mean going forward that we won't have blowouts in games in early rounds? No, we see it in college basketball all the time. Most of the games in the first round of college basketball, especially when you're a 4 seed and up, ends up being a blowout. So I don't think you're going to eliminate blowouts or eliminate teams playing bad. And I understand the argument that some people will have and say, oh, well, Tennessee got blown out too. Tennessee's in the SEC. You can't say Alabama would have done good. Tennessee beat Alabama up. So I can understand that argument. But to me, until we have, and look, can 12 teams win the national championship every year? No. One of the biggest things that we talked about was this year the anomaly? Because going into it, we're like, look at all these teams that we think can win a national championship. Is there an elite team out there, or are there just a couple really good teams? Well, turns out yesterday there may not be as many out there that can actually win it as we thought, especially if Ohio State's going to play that way. So until we change the structure, in my opinion, of how we pick the 12 teams and get a committee together that understands what they're looking at, you are going to have this type of problem. And when you give automatic bids to conference championship winners of, we'll see with Boise State, of the Mountain West and some of these smaller ones, don't be surprised if you see blowouts happen in the second round. Blaine, what did you say the spread was for Penn State-Boise?
Technically some spreads are worse in the second round than what they are in the first round. I mean, Texas is a 13.5-point favorite against Arizona State, and Penn State's a 10.5-point favorite against Boise.
I mean, we got 2 double-digit spreads going into the second round, and we'll see if they're blowouts. But I just think structurally, and I know we don't all three agree on what ingredients need to go into the cake, but we all realize that the cake that's coming out of the oven isn't as perfect as it could be. Nothing will ever be perfect. But again, I just think the way we go about picking the 12 is flawed, and that reared its head yesterday.
Well, we've never seen a year where even 6 teams we thought could win the national championship realistically. So in the first year where we double the size of even that pool and we go to 12, I'm confused as to why other people are confused that we had first round blowout games. I mean, it's the first round. That's where you're supposed to have the most lopsided games as you move forward in a tournament, and there creates more parity. That's what I'm confused with. So if the argument is we just don't have 12 teams that can compete for a national championship, they can't, the 11, 12, 13, 14, they're just not as good as 1, 2, 3, 4. Historically, that's been the case throughout college football. Then what does it matter what the picking mechanism is, right? Like you said, I mean, I would have rather seen Alabama go play Penn State. I would have rather seen that. Now, that may have had detrimental effects for the sport moving forward. If you tell someone like Indiana, who only has 1 loss, or, the SMU one was weird because they did have a conference championship loss on top of the loss to BYU. We would have all rather seen that. But like you said, well, Tennessee went and got blown out too. How are you going to keep a 10-2 Tennessee out? So if the problem is we just don't have 12 teams that can actually create competitive football games, because this isn't basketball, this isn't a different sport, then what's it going to help to change the picking mechanism?
Yeah, well, we all agree, I think, that 12 teams were not able to win the national championship this year. I think we've all agreed on that. That's why, I go back and, some people think 8's too big of a number, right? That's why I landed on 8, because the odds of having that many teams that can win a national championship are slim to none. And we thought this may be the anomalous year. This may be the year where it happens. But again, where I think it is screwed up, and where I think it really rears its head is, it would be different to me if the 1 through 4 teams played yesterday and didn't get a bye. Not that I believe they're the top 4 teams, but the way it should be is that if the 1 through 4 teams played yesterday, and if they blew out whoever they were playing, right? Like, one blew out the last seed, we'd expect that. But what happened in the 8-9 game? Right? What happened in some of these matchups that we thought, like, hey, look, we thought SMU was going to lose to Penn State. We didn't think they would get smushed like that, and we're going to go in that game breakdown. Same thing with Tennessee. Same thing, you look at Indiana, Notre Dame. Some people thought Indiana didn't deserve to be in there. That game wasn't pretty. Turns out the Indiana Notre Dame game outside of Texas-Clemson was the best game we were going to have all weekend, and that one wasn't really close throughout. So there's some change I think you can make to help it. But at the end of the day, man, Blaine, like, there's not going to be 12 teams that can win it, and you don't need to be
right
shocked
now.
if there's, not right now, but it is what it is, man.
Well, I'm currently fighting against the elements as well here, against the sun. We'll see how this goes. I love how we
good luck, Icarus.
I didn't know I was ascending into heaven as the show started, but I will say this. I watched the Notre Dame-Indiana game. The winner of that game, I didn't look at Notre Dame like, wow, they're a really good football team. I watched the Penn State-SMU game. I looked at Penn State. I'm like, I didn't say, wow, they're a really good football team. I didn't think Penn State played great. I didn't think Notre Dame played great. I watched that Tennessee-Ohio State game. I said, wow, that's a national championship-looking football team right there. That's the Ohio. There's a reason why I picked these guys to win a national championship. I've been waiting for them to play like this. They played like who Ohio State is supposed to play. You played like you had a $20 million roster. You didn't try to beat teams the way other teams beat them. You beat them how Ohio State should beat them. If anything, I looked at Ohio State and I said, wow, That's what it's supposed to look like. I didn't see that from Notre Dame, and I didn't see that from Penn State.
Well, and look, I want to get into the Tennessee-Ohio State game here in a second. Excuse me, but let's hop in the chat here real quick.
All right,
I just want to ask you guys just one question
Go
before you
ahead.
go to the chat. Because, Jake, one of the most important points you made to me when we met years ago when you and I were discussing playoff expansion, and I was telling you, like, hey, there aren't more than 4 teams that can win the national championship. And you said, yes, but this could create parity. We have a chicken and the egg situation here, guys. And I just want to ask you, like, is it better to go ahead and give us an expanded playoff now where we may have very lopsided round 1 games for several years in a row, but that helps these smaller schools go and recruit in the transfer portal and go recruit high school players, just like you pitched me on, Jake, a few years ago, so that we do have more parity in the sport, which I think the sport needs? Or what's the alternative? We could have a 14 playoff. What would be the alternative this weekend like we've had? We could have a 14 playoff, which we would all still be really excited about. I love the sport. I'm going to watch whatever they put in front of us. We could have a 14 playoff, in which case the Buckeyes and Tennessee wouldn't be in there, and they would have been playing that game yesterday in a bowl game, right? The Meineke, Car Care, whatever, Pop-Tarts Bowl on a neutral site with a bunch of opt-outs. Instead, we got to see them both go full board at a home stadium with their players playing, and it still ended up being a blowout. But isn't that better than going and watching a neutral site game?
Oh, no, and 100%. And I think you said something at the beginning, David, that, needs to resonate with college football fans. And that word is patience, right? Like it wasn't, sometimes it takes a while to build something in the best way possible. Let's go and say, just living in reality, they're not going back from 12. They're not going to go from 12 to 10 or 12 to 8 or 12 to 4. It's going to stay at 12 and then expand. But I still believe, and I think you saw this a little bit with the 4-team playoff, looking at this season, and I know NIL has an effect. I know the transfer portal has an effect to kind of even out the parity, even though the rich are going to get richer, but the rich can get richer and the poor can become middle class at the same time. In the college football world, that can happen. Maybe not in the real world, but in the college football world, that can happen. And I do believe now, look at what SMU has to pitch in recruiting. Rhett Lashley can now go in there and say, hey, we made the college football playoff. We played awful. We didn't play very good, but we went and played Penn State on the road in the college football playoff. That legitimizes us. That validates us in the eyes of some of these recruits that we used to not be able to get. Look at Arizona State and Kenny Dillingham. Look at Boise State right now and Spencer Danielson being able to say, hey, we not only did we get in the playoff, we got a bye. Heck, there's only one SEC team that got a bye. We got the same amount of byes as the SEC did. So why would you not come play at Boise State? So I do think over time it's going to have that effect. But the patience of the college football fan, not that they're going to have any control over it. They're going to watch anyway, and they're not going to change anything at the committee. I think the patience of the college football fan doesn't match up with what's going to happen down the road. Now, that doesn't mean everybody's going to be great and we're all going to live in Rainbow Land and eat lollipops and Lucky Charms and sing Kumbaya with bayonets and violins. That doesn't mean that's going to happen. But I do think it is going to be able to rise rising tide lifts all ships. Yeah. And we've even seen that a little bit this year. So on one hand, Cone, I agree with you. College football fans are not patient enough to let this thing work out the way I think it's going to work out. But I still believe, even at 12 teams, when I wanted 8, that it may even speed up the process, that it will lead to more parity. And I think we're already seeing it right now.
This idea that the committee can just deliver like guaranteed tight games is absurd. Yeah. I mean, I watched the Dolphins go on the road and play the Chiefs in the first round of the playoffs last year. It was an absolute disaster. How many teams could have played the Chiefs tighter than the Dolphins? Who else are you going to put in? They earn their way. I don't know.
This is why you have referees to keep games close.
Yeah, we saw that a little yesterday too.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, you talking about Tennessee with that roughing the passer?
Yes, that's what I'm talking about.
Sing Kumbaya with bayonets and violins.
Yeah, a bayonet's an instrument. Yeah, bayonet's an instrument. It's not just something you right. It's not just something you stab somebody with.
What does it sound like?
Fighting in the old. Things like
All
that.
Right. Let's get to this chat. Hit that like, hit that subscribe button. If you donate, it's on topic. It will get read. Hey, appreciate everybody who came to the live stream. Man, that was an absolute kickoff for us.
Yeah,
let's go to the Crunk Donkey. The 12-team playoff has proved to be useless. Should have been 8. Go Big Orange. And God, I want to break something.
Look, you won't get an argument from me about 8. I had it at 8. I thought 8 was, the Goldilocks porridge rule that 8 was just right. And we're going to get to Tennessee. Don't worry. That was an abomination.
Let's go to Chris Alexander. That may have been the most boring 24 hours of football all season.
So you say that, but on Friday night, I got to go into a cigar bar and live stream one of those games to watch Notre Dame host a game with two of my best friends and eat pizza and smoke cigars. Like, I had a great time.
Yeah, no,
So,
look, the company was fun.
I'm weird. I love football. So
Hey,
I don't know.
well, isn't it? You know what the ultimate irony is? During the regular season, we'd have these weekends where the guys like, well, this slate's kind of weak. And then it would turn out it'd just be every weekend was bonkers. Like something crazy and unexpected happened. And the first week of the college football playoff, it's all chalk. Not just chalk, but ass beatings. You talk about just flipping it on and say, we're watching Vandy beat Alabama. We're watching Northern Illinois beat Notre Dame. We're like, dog, this college football playoff is going to be sick. Like, we don't know who's going to be in there. The games are going to be wild. It's going to just be pick'ems across the board. And it was just like, God, just like watching American Psycho over and over again.
Another part of this, everyone's screaming like, we want close competitive games. Well, of course, the teams who are playing, they want their team to blow the other team out. But that aside,
God.
like SMU Duke this year, what an incredible game that goes to overtime. Not many people even watch that. Meanwhile, OSU and Tennessee on paper is supposed to be like the closest game you could possibly get out the gate. Whooping.
Yo, just from the jump.
Just
21-0 from the jump.
This feels really good if you picked Ohio State to win it all. I wonder who did
Why don't
that.
you just keep reminding
Who
everybody
did
of that?
Where's all the people saying, what a terrible take, Blaine? What a terrible take.
There's several rounds to go. Ryan Day.
Hey, don't worry. Give him another 10 minutes. He'll summon one up.
Let's get a $5 donation from Matt. Appreciate it, Matt. 6 to 8 teams was always the right answer. I know it's too late. I think Texas, Ohio State, and Oregon wins the Natty. I don't know if they all can win the Natty at the same time, but we'll see.
If that happens, they'll expand it even more.
All right, let's go to Johnny Gonzalez. He says, from a competitive standpoint, worst college football weekend in its history. Not a good start for the committee.
Well, that's who I was thinking of the whole day yesterday. Like, if you're the committee, all right, the Notre Dame-Indiana game, we kind of thought that game would be somewhat, quote-unquote, boring, right, stylistically. Not boring from this sucks to watch, but it's not going to be super high flying. So you're like, all right, Indiana 10-point win, or Notre Dame 10-point win, got a little weird at the end. Then the SMU game started, and at the beginning, and I don't want to get into the SMU preview yet, but like in the beginning, you're like, oh man, SMU's kind of riding a little bit here, and then Jennings, decided to throw that ball on 4th down, which if he makes a good throw, it's a touchdown. So SMU gets wiped. So the committee's kind of like, oh, man, like here come the Bama fans. Oh, my God, here we go. And they're like, don't worry, guys. Texas-Clemson, everybody likes, Texas. Not super worried about Clemson. It's a decent game. But, like, Tennessee getting mopped the way they did, I think saved a little bit of grace from the committee.
Yeah, how's that their fault?
It was face saving without a doubt. Yeah.
How's that their fault? Like everybody wants to like go and complain and blame the committee when they had 11 out of the 12 teams exactly the same as the committee and all the matchups except some people would have slid Alabama in except SMU.
I mean, can you just have some appetizers or a couple beers in that video? It made your life a lot easier.
No, I can't argue that.
Yeah, no, the optics and the aesthetics of the committee, it looks like an HOA.
It's like Men in Black. It's like you are the Men in Black aliens or something.
Like somebody I would be like, what are you afraid we're going to oh my God, they're drinking a beer. I'd be like, oh, thank God they're drinking a beer.
I'd be hammered in the
They're one of us.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Why isn't it like Galettes or something in Tuscaloosa? Let's really just mix this thing up.
Let's go to Bingo. He says the second round will get better. Don't worry. The first round was just separated the men from the boys.
Well, I don't know if anybody's told you this, but Boise State and Arizona State are in the second. Keep trying to tell people. They're like, don't worry, guys. Second round. And they might be nail biters. They might. But this is the whole problem with giving who you gave a bye the bye. I thought Clemson gave us a decent shot yesterday. Like for the last team in going on the road to play Texas, I thought, they hung in there for a while. Texas was a better football team overall, and we knew that. But I thought Cade Klubnik came out, right, and he was fired up. He was dialed in on all cylinders. So, like, here's just think about the matchups. Now, it's not at Penn State, but they're going to play Boise State. You stop Ashton Genty, that game's a wrap. Arizona State playing Texas. Texas great at stopping the run. We'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. It's been a crazy season or whatever, but I wouldn't just assume that this second round is just going to be amazing. And if it's not, you think people are pissed off now? Wait until that second round if there's a bunch of blowouts, what happens. But all right, let's move on, guys. I think we got to start off with this Tennessee-Ohio State game, right? Yeah. This is the one, and myself included, I was looking forward to this one the most. I thought this would be the best overall matchup team-wise, not just who was on the roster, but the way that Tennessee was structured. You see all the fans, like the invasion was real. That turned into a retreat real quick, if we're going to be honest. But the invasion was real with all the Tennessee fans that came up there. David, I'm gonna start with you here. How shocked were you with the way that Tennessee came out on defense? Like, if you'd have told me that Tennessee would have scored 10 points in the game, I could see that offensively. We've seen Tennessee kind of stall and play it slow and play it close to the vest. But you come out and get a 21 piece with Cajun fries and a honey biscuit and a Sprite in the first quarter?
Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised that Tennessee's defense didn't hold up better against the run, especially early and really throughout the game. But not a lot of this surprised me, other than even when OSU was blowing out most of the teams during the regular season, they didn't start great. So to see them, get up 21-0, that part of it was a little bit surprising. But I kept trying to tell people, Tennessee fans in the neighborhood and people who would text me and ask me, I'm like, I feel like too many people only watched the Buckeyes play one game this year, and that was against Michigan, and they think they're trash. And I'm just telling you, man, I've watched them too much in the history of their program, and I've watched them in every single game they played this year. There are playmakers on every side of the ball. I saw the game plan that Chip Kelly called against Penn State. I think that's who they really are, not the game plan they called against Michigan. I said, I think they're going to have some success, and they're going to get the ball out wide to their playmakers. Now, they do a better job than anyone in the country. Maybe you can put Oregon, maybe even Texas up there, but of throwing to set up the run. And boy, did you see that yesterday. And if there was ever a time for Travion Henderson really to have one of his best games, this was a time to do it. And then I think you saw what an important factor Dylan Sampson is for Tennessee. When you take him out of the football game, man, Tennessee on offense, like they're not the same team.
Yeah, and Blaine, I saw a lot of people on social media, they were like, man, Dylan Sampson being out, that cost Tennessee the game. Dylan Sampson is a hell of a back. He's an NFL back, but he doesn't play defense. And I want to make sure, as much as, we're going to talk about Tennessee not playing well, I do give credit to Ohio State.
Yes.
Because, again, we talk about the game plan, David. That's one of the main things we talked about this week was your game plan going into Michigan was an emotional one.
Yes.
Your game plan coming into this game was an efficient one. You played to your strengths. Even going back to the first play, we talked about it all week, spitting the ball out in space. Tennessee's really good in the front seven. You have to soften them in the middle by hurting them wide, laterally, early. And that's the first pass, I think, was to Jeremiah Smith, right, on the outside. And then what did you see? Mesh, crossers, and Will Howard, I questioned. And again, they were blowing him out so bad. It wasn't like it was a tie game in the fourth quarter and he had to fit one in. But Will Howard made all the throws. Pretty much made every single throw that he had to. The interception in the back of the end zone by the white boy safety that Tennessee had, just a hell of a play.
Yeah,
like, that's just
PI
a play. Yeah, it could have been called a PI too. But at the end of the day, and Blaine, you picked Ohio State. I want to give you your credit. You got Ohio State win the national championship. We asked, how would Ohio State bounce back from that Michigan game, not only from a player standpoint, not only from a fan standpoint, but from a game plan standpoint. And I tell you what, it must be an amazing feeling in a moment like this when a bunch of fans from another team try to overwhelm your stadium. They get 30,000 people in there, and then you just mop their ass from the first quarter on. You talk about leaving. You talk about this is why I don't go to games like this if my team is playing. It would have ruined – the ride back would have been awful. We wouldn't even have stayed that night. I'd have just got in the car and drove back just so I could wake up my house. This is why I don't do it. This is why I won't do it. But I tell you what, I kind of feel happy for Ohio State fans. And Ryan Day, how many? I'd stop in every breakfast restaurant in Columbus this morning if I'm Ryan Day. I wouldn't even get something at half the places. I would just walk in and just let everybody know, hey, what's up?
I wouldn't be surprised if somehow Ryan Day just you got peeped into this show and just popped up and started talking about how great the
we're a tough team.
Well,
I'm gonna kick Lou Holt's ass.
It's a couple things here. One, what Cone said. If you just watch the rivalry games, are weird. All right, they are. Trust me. I've watched an Auburn team who had no business being on the same field against Alabama, make Alabama go basically 95 yards on the last drive to go win the game. Rivalry games are weird. I don't really put too much into that. And two, it's just we've created this monster. All right. It seems like everybody in college football was against Ohio State. Everybody, right? Tennessee fans taking over. Ryan Day can't win the big game. Will Howard this, Will Howard that. So you've made something where a team with a $20 million roster, probably more than that, you've now created a us versus the world mentality. All right. And if you ever want to get a team together, that's how you do that. Am I surprised about how bad Ohio State beat Tennessee? For sure. I didn't think it was going to be that bad. But I'm not surprised to see how good this Ohio State team is when they actually play to their strengths. Ohio State, from a receiver standpoint, probably has the best room in the country.
Oh, it's stupid. The fact that Jeremiah Smith is a freshman is stupid. Jeremiah was put together in a lab.
Can go start in any NFL team right now, and he's 14 years old. NFL receiver. You have two true running backs in the backfield that you are going to watch play on Sundays. The question was, Will Howard, is he good enough? And a lot of it has to do with Chip Kelly tailoring the offense to Will Howard's strengths. Short passes early. You substitute the short passes to help with the run game. If Ohio State knows their identity, and look, you can say what you want about Ryan Day, but damn it, he's been here before. All right, he knows what it takes to win these games. Josh Heupel doesn't. When's the last time Tennessee's been anything in the postseason that matters? All right, the real question is, was the moment too big for Tennessee? You say it about SMU. You could say it about Indiana. No. Was Tennessee ready?
I just don't think they were as good.
Yeah, I mean, after watching that, Cone, I'm sitting there watching that game last night, me and Blaine are, and this was the sequence for Ohio State on offense. Starting out, right, I'll put it in thirds. Swing pass wide, now screen wide, short passing game, intermediate run game, whether that's zone or whether that's gap scheme. Then they'd get you down and they'd say, Jeremiah Smith, go deep. That's what they say, Jeremiah Smith, go deep. Because what happens, people think that just the run brings DBs down. No, when I'm sitting here, and Tennessee plays a lot of man, right? But you can play man from different depths and different leverages. When you're throwing those short passes, when you're getting Jeremiah Smith on a crosser, and it's taking my safety forever to tackle him, and you're getting 7 to 10 yards a pop, what do I have to do as a DB? I've got to come down, whether that's coming down to press you or whether that's coming down to limit the amount of space underneath me. That's where they were getting. That was a masterclass put on by Chip Kelly. What he did to Tim Banks last night was an absolute masterclass. It was Oppenheimer versus me in a math class. That's what it looked like last night. I'm
there's only a couple.
To death. Go ahead.
Hey, do I need to come over there? There's only a couple halves of football this season. Now I'm going to choke to death. That have really just blown me away in terms of being near perfect. When we watched Alabama play Georgia in the first half when we were at Innisfree, that was one of those halves of football. And then yesterday too, and watching Chip Kelly and Will Howard attack every single level of this defense. You're talking about the now screens and the tunnel screens and the quick routes and stuff. Well, that helps set up the go routes, which they hit multiple of those for touchdowns. But then the intermediate passing game too. How many times did they run sail to the field against zone coverage? Crushed them. Huge first downs. But then on the flip side of that too, when you look at Tennessee's offense, at least you ran Nico. They ran Nico a bunch. We were asking, how much quarterback power are we going to get? How much rollout are we going to get? At least you ran him, and you still rushed for 152 without one of the best players in the SEC and Dylan Sampson. So at least you had that going for you. But I mean, Blaine, you and I were talking about how close to the line of scrimmage does Caleb Downs play. We were talking about it all week, and you saw the Buckeyes come out. You pretty much have to play in your nickel package against Tennessee with the wide splits like that. Yeah. And what were they doing? Nickel package, Caleb down near the line of scrimmage, man. So effective.
Absolutely ate him.
Look, Ohio State ran against basically a light box the entire game.
Yeah.
the entire game and dared Tennessee to run it. And Ohio State not only won this game up front on both sides of the ball, they won it everywhere you looked at, right? And if you do that, if Will Howard plays like this, guys,
they're going to win.
They have like that. That's the team I watched, and I was like, that's the Ohio State I've been expecting to see. I think they played their best game.
Well, I think they did too. But I do think Texas could be a problem.
Why?
I do think Texas could be, because I think Texas's defensive front seven can play with an even box and slow down this run game and make Will Howard throw it to beat him. The question to me for Texas is, can they allow Quinn Ewers to get enough time to get the ball out? Yeah. Because he can't run like Nico. He can't do the things that Nico did yesterday. That was the only hope they had. Guys, and I want to get to Tennessee and then to the chat. I know it's buzzing in the chat. We're going to get there. But listen to these numbers just quickly. Will Howard yesterday, 24 of 29 for 311, 2 touchdowns, and that incredible pick. Rushing, Travion Henderson, 10 carries for 80 yards. That's 8 yards a carry, 2 touchdowns. Will Howard had 40 yards on 5 carries. Quinshad Judkins had 34 yards on 10 carries and 2 touchdowns. If Will Howard is coming out and doing that, Ohio State is not losing. They're not losing. Their roster's too good. We talked about complementary football, right? Offense, defense, special teams. Is Oregon the most complete team in college football? That was one of the most complete and thorough games that you will see from a college football team at this level in this moment. That's why Ohio State yesterday was by far and away the most impressive team of the first round. But David, I want to throw this question to you and Blaine too, and then we'll get in the chat. If you're a Tennessee fan, how are you feeling this morning about the future with Nico Iamaleava and the way that this team – you can't come out in pregame warm-ups with your shirt off and get beat to death like that. Like, you can't come out here and Josh Heupel was hype and the walking through, it's going to be our day, it's going to be our day. How do you come out and you look like a fake gangster? That's what you look like. You look like a wankster, as it was called when I was growing up. So if I'm a Tennessee fan, look, you went 10-3. You beat Alabama, had some ups, had some downs. But Nico going forward, David, I'm going to start with you, former quarterback. How should you feel if you're a Tennessee fan about Nico this morning?
Man, it's a great question. I was thinking about this last night because the grand sum of Tennessee fans' ambition isn't just to win 10 games. And, you beat Alabama, and that's great, but then you lost to Georgia and you made a playoff when it's tripled in size, but you got bounced in the first round. Like, they want to get back to what 1998 was. So, to me, they have to do 2 things. One, go get as many great players from the transfer portal like everyone else is trying to do, especially playmakers on the outside for Nico. But then as far as your quarterback goes, it's going to be about how does he develop. And keep in mind, you still won 10 games this year with a freshman quarterback. I think Nico is going to develop. But the floor for me would be, is he DJ Uiagalelei? Throw for several thousand yards a season, over 20 touchdowns, run the ball pretty well in some games, but there's just a certain ceiling. Or is this kid Jaden Daniels? Remember, we watched Jaden Daniels for several seasons at Arizona State, had some talent, but he became the Heisman Trophy winner with 3,800 passing yards and 1,100 rushing yards. Does Nico take that kind of step where we say, wow, that's what we thought the potential was when he got to be an upperclassman?
Yeah, and Blaine, I want to throw this comp at you real quick. Or does he just become like Justin Herbert? Really good prospect, long guy, big arm. A lot of pros like him, wins a lot of games, but really doesn't win anything.
God, that's tough. One, from the Jaden Daniels comp, I think he's going to need a lot of help at receiver. For Jaden Daniels, you walked in with Malik Neighbors. You had absolute dogs running around.
And he played like 6 years, too.
Yeah, right. Yeah. You lose Dylan Sampson from Tennessee. You have good receivers, but you don't have great receivers. And Ohio State was locking them up for mostly the entire game. Man, I think Nico's going to be fine. The only thing I really worry about, are you going to have a defense that's good again? Right now, you checked all the boxes from a Tennessee fan standpoint to actually have a run in this playoff. I just think you ran into a $20 million roster in that show. You're great at running the ball. You're great at stopping the run. You're experienced in the back end. You're experienced up front. You have one of the best running backs in college football who did get hurt. So I think Nico will be fine. I think Nico's going to be a lot better player than DJU. I thought DJU had a lot better talent around him than what Nico had. And I think but if you're Josh Heupel, like you can't walk into this game and get beat that bad after your fans took over 40% of the
That's
state.
what, man, that's to me.
Not only did you let your team down, I mean, you let yourself down and you let those fans down who travel. And it's not like you have to go win the game, but you can understand as a fan being on the road and at least keep it competitive. At one point, Ohio State put their backups in with 10 minutes left to go in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
They played their fourth string quarterback.
Yeah.
Like it's borderline disrespectful, and I hated the game plan from Tennessee as well on offense. I don't think Nico knew what he was looking at. He'd go through one read and just absolutely take off. And he took a shot now. I mean, broke his damn helmet.
Yeah.
That first drive. And you want to talk about setting the tone, right? Setting the tone. That's how you set the tone where you hit a guy so hard. Not only is a quarterback that you shatter his helmet.
Well, Blaine, what you said, I think is spot on. We're not saying you have to go and win the game, right? That you have to go win it. Now, you can think that, right? If you're Josh Heupel, well, we have to go win this game. But, man, you get beat like that from the jump. Like, you give up 35. They gave up more points in the first 7 minutes of the first quarter than they have averaged given up per game. Like, you saved it's funny. It's two opposite ends of the spectrum. Ohio State saved the best game for pretty much their biggest moment, right? Outside of playing Michigan. Tennessee waited to the biggest moment to probably play their worst game since Arkansas, if you want to go back to it. So, you got all these people that travel up. You got all this excitement, all this buildup. We're going to invade Columbus. We're going to show you what the SEC is about, this, that, and the other. And it's not like, man, they beat us on a last-second field goal, $20 million roster. That wasn't what happened. You showed up by the river, and they just instantly started drowning you. Like, you didn't even get a punch in. If I'm a Tennessee fan, and you still kind of had a little chance. Like that first drive coming out of the second half, that's where the game was lost, right? When you didn't convert, and then Ohio State got the ball right back and took it right down the field and scored. But man, it's just that's a tough pill to swallow if you're a Tennessee fan or you're Josh Heupel.
And if you're Josh, it's the way you come out. It has a lot to do with the coaching, right? It really does from a script standpoint. It just seemed like Tennessee, not only the way they came out, but the way they came out in the second half. They seemed like they were just unprepared. They seemed like they didn't know what they were looking like. And it looked like Chip Kelly and Ryan Day they knew what Will Howard needed to do. They told him the game plan. It wasn't too complicated. We have better players, and it's simple execution, and that's what they did.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and quickly, I want to get to the chat. We got to move on. But it's the little things to me. How do you not put a returner back there on that last field goal before the half? What are you doing? How scared are you? Yeah. Like, how scared are you? It's like Dylan Sampson went out of the game, and everybody just lost their minds. Like, he's this dude cannot hit from 56. It's freezing cold. The wind is in his face, and you don't send a returner back there. Like, you should, and again, that doesn't mean he's going to return it for a touchdown. This may not be a kick six situation, but to me, that showed a lack of aggression because of a lack of confidence. If I'm going to get blown out, blow me out with me swinging my sword, dude. Shout out our guy, Mike Leach. It felt like Tennessee, from a coaching standpoint, just laid down too and said, well, we made it to the playoff. At least we all got to be together to get slaughtered in Columbus, us and the fans. I just thought it was a very, very soft, adjustment by the coaching staff as well, not just the defense. But let's get to the chat here, Mike.
All right, let's get to a $5 donation from Zoe Anderson. Appreciate it, Zoe. Says, I love my balls, but what is BTA and why do people say OSU gave us so much of it?
BTA.
That's belt to ass.
Oh yeah, that's belt. Yeah, I thought for a second you said BTK, and I was like, God, I hope that didn't happen.
Let's go to a $5 donation from Gus Johnson. Appreciate it, Gus. How you like us now, David Cohn? We're going to keep winning all Ryan Day long.
Hey, doesn't this mean he has to call in next week as
I
Gus
think
Johnson?
So. I think so. He has to call in.
Let's go to Scott Grable. OSU played the best game they've played all year. If they put 3 games like that together, no one is beating them, but rarely do teams play nearly perfect for 4 straight games.
Yeah, and they won't be playing at home either. That's a big advantage. But, nobody is shocked that when the $20 million roster plays good, they're really good. Like, the thing was, they just consistently, we haven't seen them package it together like that. I thought they played Oregon pretty tough, man. Like that, you go back to that game, that was a heck of a game. But we haven't seen them and against a team that at least we thought going into, and again, I don't want to take any credit away from Ohio State, was a really good team in Tennessee. That was just so thorough of an absolute splattering. Like that's just, if I'm going to pay $20 million, if I'm an Ohio State donor, all right, and I gave $100,000 to the NIL fund, that's what I wanted to see.
Yeah.
Like, that's the return on my investment. Not what you did against Michigan, where you're like, we're going to emotionally destabilize them and show them that we can run it and beat them. No, take my money and make good decisions with who you're getting the ball to, which, you know what? If I was Chip Kelly, I may just not throw it to anybody but Jeremiah Smith. Fight me. Like that dude. And of course, Egbuka's nice. Carnell Tate's nice. You know, the tight end, I mean, the G. Scott dude, I'm looking at this monster run around, and I'm like, it just never ends. It's like just a barrel full of great players. But Jeremiah Smith is just doing some other stuff. Like, it just, that dude is different, bro. Like, that, we talk about Marvin Harrison Jr. and like, hey, this guy was like, you know, the best we'd seen in a really long time, and he's cold. I mean, he's cold as the North Pole in wintertime. But, like, this Jeremiah Smith cat, like, he's
Randy Moss, but he weighs 225.
They're like, I didn't even
plug and play for them. I mean, they've had 4 first-round wide receivers in 3 seasons.
They hadn't had anything like this.
Cone, they said
what?
Cone.
I heard Marvin Harrison Jr. was the greatest college prospect to ever play college football, and that was 12 months ago.
Cone,
and then I saw Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave go 10 and 11 back-to-back. Jackson Smith and Jigba's catching for 270 yards in Rose Bowl. They stay with one. And whoever the next – and you're going to say the same thing about whoever they get next year, because that's all they do. That's all they do is they keep.
I agree. One. That's all they do. But they hadn't had a guy like
they
this.
said. Didn't they say
as
Chip
a freshman,
Kelly
it
said?
Is impressive.
Didn't they say on the broadcast that Chip Kelly said he's the closest thing to Calvin Johnson he's ever seen?
I believe it.
That's like,
he's 11 years old.
Woo! Like it's wild. But all right, let's take
it. OG 22 says Tennessee looked confused. Lack of being part of the big stage showed up last night.
Well, and listen, I'm not going to sit here and argue with you that you know, Tennessee hadn't been on the big stage in a while in the postseason, right? We've seen them, you know, beat Alabama, you know, win some big games in the regular season. This is what it looked like to me. I don't think Tennessee realized how good. I'm talking about the players on the field. Realized how good Ohio State was. It almost looked to me like they were shocked after the first quarter. Like, oh my God, because like part of that. And listen, y'all know we're from SEC country, and you know, again, we always talk about multiple things can be true at once. The SEC can, in aggregate, be the most dominant conference, but it's not every year where they're going to have the best team, or maybe not even be the best conference every year. But it was almost like Tennessee was like, look, Ohio State, we're going to go play them. They're overrated. They're really not that good. Look at what Michigan did to them. Michigan pushed them around. And it was like halfway through the first quarter, they're like, oh my God, they're like really good. And they're huge. And they're fast. Like it just, Tennessee to me, I don't think they were underprepared from a game plan standpoint going in. I think they were underprepared from a personnel standpoint against what they were going up against. Look at the eyes of the DBs on Tennessee's defense when they were just getting cooked. And what you kind of saw it after that face mask on the first drive that Ohio State had. Because I'm telling you right now, he doesn't grab that face mask, this may be a different story for this whole game. But, you know, if ifs and buts were candy nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas. It was like the minute that drive got extended, Tennessee was like, oh, God. Because they had seen him run 3 plays earlier than that, right? I felt like they were underprepared from how good Ohio State was, and I thought it showed.
Let's go to GOJ. This $20 million roster angle is misleading. Texas is the $20 million roster, and Michigan has a 16.
Well, yeah, I think there's 4 schools that have upwards of 20, but those other schools weren't the ones going around saying it was the greatest roster ever assembled either. That's what kind of made it funny this year.
Yeah, well, there's 4 of them? Like, that's fine.
I think the latest numbers I saw were 4.
Yeah, there's 4 of them. So if 4 Lamborghinis are out driving around Nashville, I expect all of them to drive really good and look cool. Like, that's just because a couple other people have it, doesn't mean that I don't want to. What am I? If I'm a booster, I'm like, oh, I gave $1 million. Well, 3 other schools gave $1 million too. So I really don't care how we do. That's not how that works. You are at the upper echelon of college football. If I'm paying 20, it's not like you're the only $20 million roster, but you're one of the very few. They're in a lot of 9-story houses in Nashville, but there's probably 3 or 4 of them That doesn't make them any less cool, or that doesn't make me want to enjoy it any less when I walk into it. So it's not misleading. It's what you are. And if I'm paying $20 million for something, you better play good and coach good.
All right, let's go to Gary Klein. What's up, Gary? All this game did is prove if Michigan had a quarterback, they would have been back-to-back national champs.
Thank you. Who is that, Gary?
Yeah.
It's Gary Klein.
I mean, I'm reluctant just to look. I've been a part of a lot of quarterback blaming in bad years at Michigan, so I feel for those guys. But yeah, I mean, it just shows you like that. To what Blaine said, man, that's a rivalry game, and that's just you can't just watch them play that one game and think they're going to be trash, man.
Yeah, but look how they looked against Nebraska. Like, I mean, there's other I think there's other examples of I remember watching Ohio State playing Akron and getting beat up on the offensive line.
I get it, but it's kind of like the Georgia thing. It's like, man, look at the way that Georgia, played against Tennessee, and Georgia played against Texas twice, and then they have games like Georgia Tech. Or who was it, Samford? They giving up It was just like, I mean, everybody
UMass.
in the country,
it was UMass.
Oh, UMass, sorry. Or even Oregon early in the year. Remember, you asked me, do we think Oregon's fraudulent 3 weeks in? And we were like, man, maybe. Well, they're the only undefeated team in college football.
Yeah, consistency. All right, let's move on here. Texas beats Clemson 38-24. The 21 points that Texas scored in the second quarter, that's what really made the difference. But look, Clemson, they fought their way back a little bit. This Texas team just ended up being too much. And when Quinn Ewers is protected, he's an absolute assassin. I mean, the interception wasn't on him. It was a great throw. The blindside block. If I was a South Carolina fan watching that game and I saw the blindside block off a pick six that you're kind of questioning, that basically cost them their season against LSU. But as far as Texas, because now the question is going to be asked, and it should be asked, they're the team that I picked to win it all. If Texas plays at their best and Ohio State plays at their best, who are you taking? Most people are going to say Ohio State. But I tell you what, I'm so impressed, Blaine. I want to start with you. We know the defense for Texas is really good. Cade Klubnik and them came out when they were on script the first drive. I thought Cade made a couple off-platform throws, a couple late decisions with the ball that were really good, kept him in the game. They ran him a lot that kept him in the game as well. But don't forget, Texas lost their top two running backs, I believe, heading into the season. And what Quintravian Wisner and Jaden Blue have done in the absence of those two guys, not only from running the ball, but catching the ball and pass protecting. Wisner goes 15 carries for 110 and 2 tugs yesterday. Jaden Blue looked like the fastest guy in the state. 14 carries, $146 and 2 touchdowns. Quinn goes 17-24, 202, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Cade Klubnik, 26 of 43, 336, 3 touchdowns and a pick. Blaine, how good is this Texas team?
I think Texas is very good. The one thing I do worry about, and we've talked about it all year, who's Quinn Ewers when he can't stand on that spot? And you can go look at his stats, you can go look at his numbers. Quinn, if he's protected in the pocket, is one of the best quarterbacks in the country. But when he is not, he becomes mediocre extremely quickly. I don't think he has great pocket presence. He doesn't have great feel. He needs to learn how to step up and not step out. I will say this about one thing I've focused on with Texas, and not a lot of people have until kind of later in the season, is how good their defense is, especially from their front seven standpoint. But I saw some weaknesses in the secondary.
Yeah.
And the one thing I will say, when you match up, if you have guys on Clemson who can win one-on-one matchups, I promise you there's a team in Columbus that have a couple guys that can win one-on-one matchups. And that's what I worry about when it comes to Texas. The run game will always be there. I thought Sark called a phenomenal football game. They dominated up front. Clemson had to manufacture a lot more and do a lot more to get points, rather than what Texas had to do is say hike and turn and hand the ball off. It's always tough for me to bet against a Dabo Swinney team when they get in the playoffs. Dabo's been there. He knows what it takes to win games. I thought Clemson played a damn good football game. I thought Clemson played about as good as they can play, and that's good for Dabo. But I think Texas, if they can keep Quinn Ewers on a spot and not get pressured, which is a lot easier said than done, I think they can play with anybody. But I think the way the best teams are built, especially that team in Ohio State, they have guys who can get there with their standard rushing four. They have guys who can pressure Quinn. They don't have to bring extra pressure to get to your quarterback. So it's going to be an interesting game. This Arizona State game is going to be interesting. Right now, it is the largest spread in the second round of the playoffs.
Well, and Cone, we talked about that matchup stylistically not being great for Arizona State because they aren't built right? Like in Ohio State, especially with Tyson out at the wide receiver position. And I don't want to look too far ahead. You never know what's going to happen. But to me, if I'm Ohio State and I turn that tape on and I watch that Texas versus Clemson game, I am taking a carbon copy, an absolute clone of my offensive game plan against Tennessee and using that against Texas. I don't think you have to change anything. They're going to be able to stop the run a little bit. I mean, if you look, it's not like, Ohio State ran for 500 yards. They ran it good enough against this Tennessee defense. But I think Texas will be able to slow down the run even more. But that's where that quick pass game gets supplemented. To Blaine's point, how concerned are you if you're a Texas fan? And we've heard, you got the Thorpe Award winner in the secondary for Texas. Taft's a good player. They're like me and Blaine were talking yesterday. They're like the white wine aisle at like Kroger, where it's like they got some exciting whites, when that's like the label. They got a couple that can really play. But how concerned are you if you're a Texas fan about your secondary going up against potentially the Avengers that Ohio State has outside?
Man, I love a good white. Just in terms of this game, if you told me Clemson lost the football game like this, I would say what happened was Clemson was unable to run the football against Texas, and they had to put it in Cade Klubnik's hands every single play and ask him to go make a bunch of NFL throws. And just over time, even though maybe he made some big plays here or there, just made too many mistakes, turned the football over. Texas ends up winning by 14. That's not what happened. Cade Klubnik is the reason this game even got close, 3-time state champ, just 10 miles from the stadium. What a game to have one of your best games the way he played. I just didn't see Clemson's defense giving up 292 rushing yards. And, one of the things I want college football fans to understand is we think of Steve Sarkisian as this, offensive coordinator guru who calls all these great passing plays, but it's the run game that he's so effective at. And that helps open up a lot of these intermediate passes that we see Quinn Ewers have success on. The pin and pull touchdown into the boundary, an absolute work of art. And look, you're going to see more of that throughout the playoffs. When you ask me moving forward for Texas, whoever they might play, how am I feeling about that? I can't just forget the two offensive performances that they played against Georgia. Now, maybe it's just a Georgia thing. Maybe it's just a Kirby Smart thing. Maybe Oregon and the Buckeyes and Notre Dame and Penn State and none of those teams can do to Texas what Georgia was able to do, and maybe they move forward and win the national championship. But those two offensive performances, you got two cracks at Kirby Smart, one at your place, one in the SEC championship game at a neutral site, and that offense was left found wanting. So to me, look, you still have to prove it against the top competition that you're going to play moving forward in the season. And if that ends up being the Buckeyes with how great they played yesterday, or even Oregon, who's still undefeated, or possibly a third game against Georgia, we could still see that in the national championship, then that's something that's really going to be interesting to keep an eye on.
Well, what are the two losses to Georgia, right? Because it's the only team you lost to. If you're Texas, what do the two losses have in common against Georgia? What were you not able to do? You were not able to run the ball.
Rush for 20 yards.
Yeah, and this is what we've said. This is what we've said about Quinn Ewers when we asked, is it good enough to rely on Quinn Ewers to win a national championship? And we said, no. We think it's going to have to be the defense with the run game, and then Quinn Ewers gets filtered in there because the run game is the ultimate form of protection. So Quinn Ewers can't beat you by himself, right? And again, we you talk about Sark, obviously the balanced attack that he wants to bring. I will say the difference in the run game between Tennessee and Texas schematically and what they do to your eyes as a defender are very, very different. Mm-hmm. Tennessee is somewhat simple when it comes down to their run game, right? You're going to get your split zone. You're going to get your zone read. You're going to get some quarterback design runs. You're going to get that counter, right? Tennessee loves that counter play. There's a lot less going on, and you have two pullers and counters. But Steve Sarkisian's run game is a lot more like Lincoln Riley's than Josh Heupel is. There is a lot of eye candy. There is a lot of pre-snap movement. There's a lot of out formationing. There is a lot of formationing into the boundary to run it into the boundary and formationing it into the boundary to trade the tight ends out of 12 personnel and then run it into the field or possibly even the boundary. So if Tennessee's run game was a Harry Potter book from a complicated standpoint, then what Steve Sarkisian in Texas does, right, is the Book of Enoch. Okay, so it's like that. The complexity is way different, and I think that will help Texas against Ohio State. I think it would slow them down a little bit, but I think a lot more has to go right for Texas, and it's going to line up a lot better if they do play Ohio State than what it does for Ohio State and what they can get away with. If Will Howard will make the routine throws like that, that's all he has to do. Nobody's asking you to be Batman. Nobody's asking you to be Superman. Just be a good Robin, right? Just be a good Robin. Hell, be a good Catwoman. It's 2024. Be who you want to be, right? Just make the routine plays routine, and I thought that's what Will Howard did. Let's get to the chat, and then let's get to this Penn State-SMU game, then preview a couple of these for next week.
All right, let's go to a $5 donation from TNL. It says, which coaching staff do you trust the most? Georgia, Texas, Penn State, or Ohio State?
Got to be Georgia, right?
Got to be Georgia. Yeah, got to be Georgia. Got
two natties.
Yeah. And isn't it funny? People have kind of forgotten about Georgia. Right. Yeah. It's like we're like Ohio State, Texas.
Because the first round bye.
Wow,
Yeah.
Yeah. The first round bye. Like, man, Ohio State, Texas, this, that, and the other. Georgia's sitting right there, too. We'll see about Gunner, young Gunner. We'll see what he's going to do.
Let's go to M. He says, Cade Klubnik was a better QB on the field last night. Clemson was just at a talent disadvantage.
Agreed. Their Clemson's defensive line got pushed around. Make no mistake. That was a smushing.
Let's go to Captain Wayfair. It says, why are we acting like Texas can run when they couldn't even reach 100 yards on the ground in 2 games against Georgia?
I don't know if they hit 50 in those 2 games.
No, I think they had 52. I think Wisner had 52 in the first one and 51 in the second. Yeah, we're saying they've been able to run outside of that game. Now, Georgia's not Ohio State. I think you make the argument that Ohio State is more talented. But again, maybe it's something Kirby knows. Don't forget, these guys win against each other, right? When he was at Alabama, so they know each other, they know of each other. Not that Ohio State doesn't, but it's a little bit different, I think, when you have that past relationship. But we'll see. It all comes down to players anyway.
One thing Texas did do yesterday against Clemson is when Clemson's defense was able to get to Quinn Ewers, and they had a couple sacks in this game, Texas was able to overcome that and complete first downs. It wasn't the same way. When Clemson got behind schedule, like they were done for the drive pretty much. And that's one of the things when Texas is going against Georgia's defense, when they get to Quinn Ewers, they're off schedule then. Texas against Clemson's defense was able to kind of overcome that and create first downs still.
Yeah, second and 16 against Georgia is a little bit different than second and 16 against Clemson. You want to know who you should ask? Clemson. Remember what Georgia did to them in the first game? Let's not forget that either.
And we saw Arch in some big moments. I mean, had the 4th down fumble there too. I wonder how much do you think that's going to be in Steve Sarkisian's mind in big moments moving forward in the playoffs?
Arch scoot up.
Yeah,
or does he feel like he's 8 yards
in the shotgun? Yeah, it does feel like he's way back there. I don't know if that's what Sark's saying, but it's how many people yesterday, how many Texas fans yesterday after the fumble were like, not his fault. It's
on the center, obviously.
Definitely the center's fault. Now, look, Arch Manning didn't win you a national championship this year, and I love how they're trying to use him like Tebow, hey, come in short yardage. We got us a tough-ass freshman in here. And look, Arch breaks tackles. They actually let him throw the ball one time yesterday, but he tucked it, broke a tackle. So, look, Arch is going to be fine, but this is Quinn's team. If y'all going to win it,
I was thinking of you on that play, on that pass play.
I know. I thought it was going to be more creative, though. They just dropped them back.
One play, for some reason, that just sticks in my head. After all the great things Quinn did, I can't remember exactly when he slid. He just got a little bit of pressure and just slid for no reason.
Yeah, throw it away.
That's the Quinn that worries me.
Yeah.
Right? I don't care what robot he has on his ankle. All right? Blaine.
And
we saw him take off a little bit.
That's what I was about to say. We saw him actually step up on a 3rd down and take off. Me and Blaine looked at each other at the same time. We were like, why don't you just do that? Nobody's asking you to be Michael Vick or Usain Bolt or that white boy with curly hair that runs track at Georgia that everybody loves. Just step up in the pocket and go run and get 6 yards. Look at Drew Aller. Drew Aller looks like a huge cat with socks on his feet when you put him on the table when he runs. But he steps up and it works. Just do it.
Let's go to Hunt Hunter. He says, Sark is OCD about balance, and that's how we can get into some trouble.
I mean, is that a bad thing, though, to be OCD about being balanced on offense? I mean, maybe if it takes you away from playing your strengths, but Man, I think Sark plays it right. I feel like that's almost complaining like your wife cooks too much and cleans too much. Like, I'm just not – that's hard for me to get pissed off about unless it's totally – because there's so many things. And, David, y'all both see this, but you know this. What Sark does pre-snap and from a formation standpoint is just everything is so well connected. Like, they're setting you up the whole game. Like it,
and then, previous games from the tape.
In previous games, like it's so good what he does. What next Texas game you watch? I bet you can count on one hand, how many snaps. Not when they're going tempo. Take tempo out of it, like last 2 minutes or something. How many times they don't motion? Texas motions so Chip Kelly does it too a ton at Ohio State. Because you're trying to find out the coverage, right? Because if you know the coverage, whether it's man or it's zone, you probably got a good idea how many guys are going to end up in the box and how this play is going to work out and where to look during that play to maybe hit him 2 quarters later. But speaking about 2 quarters later, I mean, after 2 quarters of the Penn State-SMU game, it was already see you later.
2 drives.
Penn State rolls them. I mean, you're up 28-0 at halftime. And you know, if you didn't watch the game, you would just say, well, you know, Penn State just must have been that much better than SMU. And I do want to give Penn State credit. They deserve it. But your best offense for about the first quarter and a half was your defense. Kevin Jennings yesterday, literally we talked about it all lead up to this, was he is going to have to be great in the havoc plays, in the plays that break down, and he's got to run around and spin out and do all that other stuff, because what SMU had catapulted SMU with him at quarterback was he could make those incredible plays, and he wasn't making the big mistake, right? It was only really for the positive or a net neutral, right? Throwing the ball away. Yesterday, when the play broke down and those havoc plays started, not only did he not make the great play, he made the catastrophic play and made it multiple times. But Penn State, you got to give them credit. They smelled blood in the water. I mean, you look at the rushing numbers, Singleton 14 for 90 and a tud, Katron Allen 11 for 70 and 2 tuds. You know, Aller finished 13 to 20. Maybe it was the cold weather, which I don't think that's an excuse when you're a quarterback at Penn State. Aller looked scared to throw the ball yesterday. I don't know what was up with that. But Jennings, he threw it right to Penn State, and they took advantage.
I thought Kevin Jennings, it was the worst college football playoff performance that I can really remember from any player. And you guys asked me, do I think that the moment was too big for Nico and Josh Heupel in Tennessee against the Buckeyes? No, OSU just threw a perfect game against you. You just got struck out, right? In this moment, it seemed like the moment was too big for Kevin Jennings. Even take away the turnovers. Even that 4th down, you have a perfect play call run on the bootleg. You can either get the first down, or if someone's wide open in the goal line, you're the quarterback for a reason. If you feel like it's better to give up a guaranteed first down to throw a touchdown, then do that, but hit him. The throw was terrible. So you either need to get that first down or you need to throw the touchdown and go up 7-0 on Penn State. But then turnover after turnover, you didn't even give your team a chance to see if Penn State was legitimately better than you. And shout out to SMU's defense. I mean, they're fighting their butts off, doing everything they could to at least keep it competitive. Without those turnovers, I think Penn State still wins. They probably still cover the spread, but at least force the other team to prove they're better than you and give yourself a chance, man.
Yeah. Yeah, well, Blaine, I wasn't mad that Kevin Jennings decided to throw that ball. I like that aggression when the guy's wide open.
Yeah.
When the guy is wide open, you went there to win the game. You got a chance to shoot Achilles in the Achilles the first time you touch the ball, go down, and your defensive line is standing up, boy. They are standing up. SMU was playing on Penn State's side of the line of scrimmage on defense. I felt so awful for that SMU defensive coordinator. They were pitching a shutout, right? Outside of 2 pick sixes thrown by Kevin Jennings. We're looking at a 7-0 halftime lead for Penn State, boys, if they don't throw the 2 pick sixes. But I wasn't upset that he didn't take off and get the first down. You have a guy wide open. You have got to make that throw in that situation. The message that would have sent, not only to Penn State and all those people there in Happy Valley, but to SMU's team to go up 7-0 after each team had touched the ball. Drew Aller on that first drive looked like he could see and was trying to read Braille. That's what it looked like to me. That first third down where he had the guy wide open on the swing or the wheel or whatever it was, and he would take off and start, take off or stop, take off and stop, and then underthrew it. I was like, I'm telling you, if Kevin Jennings plays his B game, SMU can win it, but he played his F game. But I like the aggressiveness. You just got to come through, dog.
Well, if you're not going to win it for us, at least just don't lose it for us.
Yeah, that's true.
Right, and that's what you did. You can't throw 2 pick sixes in the first half at Penn State. And look, I wasn't impressed with Penn State after the end of this game. I wasn't impressed with Drew Aller. It just seems that, you can do one thing wrong, just don't do everything wrong. And that's what Kevin Jennings did. And if I'm Rhett Lashley, man, look, and I know you've rode with us the entire year, but I got to make a change. Something's got to change for at least a spark or something like that. I
don't know if I agree with that.
I don't know if Preston Stone's ass.
Even after you saw SMU come back in the second half against Clemson?
I mean, yeah, different football game.
Well, are you, Blaine, are you talking about for the game or next year?
Sooner or later, I mean, he's just not ready for it. He's just not ready for it. And you have to create a spark. It's your job. You have to create something.
Okay, are you talking about next year? Are you talking about that game?
That game.
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about next year. Yeah.
No,
I thought you were
I'm not
saying
talking about next year. It's just like that one pick he threw right to him. That I'll never understand it.
That was bad.
You can see a guy start to press.
Yeah.
Right. And he started pressing immediately in this game, pressing the first drive. How do you mess that up? Right? That 4th and 1. How do you mess that up? First of all, the throw was late by 6 seconds. He had the guy wide open early, right when he broke the pocket. The tight end was open. If you're going to do that, if you're going to try to throw it late, I'd rather you run and get 3 yards. In a game like this, and you're SMU, and you're outmatched on both sides of the football, the difference can be what? Your quarterback. And he was the difference, and now the difference in you getting your ass beat for 4 quarters. It wasn't even fun to watch. I couldn't even watch it. I felt bad for Rhett. Yeah. I've never felt bad for a football coach before. I felt bad.
Well,
for
Rhett called it to win. Rhett called
did.
The game to win it. You called a pass play on 4th and 1 in the first quarter on a boot with a running quarterback. Like, you called it to win it. And I'm going to make sure and give him credit for that. They just didn't come through, and that's part of it. But, all right, let's get to the chat. Let's preview these games real quick.
All right, let's go to WJP. What's up, man? He says, guys, I really like the SMU in this football game. I also took the over. I just don't understand how the quarterback comes out like this after playing like that in the ACC championship and throws out a complete dud.
I mean, look, I do want to say this. We're critical of players sometimes, but I'm going to always look at your full body of work and not judge you just off of one game. As big as this game was for SMU, and even Rhett talking about after the game, validating us being in there. Kevin Jennings has done so much good. He's done so much good all year. I'm not going to sit here and say that he played bad. I think he would tell you he played bad. He was one of the main reasons that they lost, and I think everybody knows that. But I think it's a different situation from if he had been playing just okay to bad all year and this happened, then I think you can clown him, and that's fine about his gameplay, not him as a person. But this guy's done so much good for SMU all year. He is one of the main reasons that they are here, and I think looking toward the future, he always said that he's coming back for next year. It was a bad game. I think it was a really bad game from him. And
I will say that his offensive line did not help him.
No, but he would tell you it was on him. He would say his offensive line didn't throw those interceptions. There were times where he was protected. We can go back to that 4th down play. So it's disappointing, but it's one game. It's a hell of a year, guys. SMU made the playoff. SMU made the playoff, made the ACC championship game, and they got a lot to build on.
And I'll add this, man, as someone who's had to go into Happy Valley during a whiteout in sub-freezing conditions, man, it's a lot. Like we can say like, oh, well, it's no big deal, and you're a football player, and but I'm just telling you, man, that stadium is rocking. It's freezing cold, and you add on top of that Penn State has a really good football team. Like, it is a recipe to get blown out.
No, it's a lot easy to sit. It's easy to sit here and critique, right? And going and doing it is a totally different thing.
All right, let's go to Mitch7. What's up, Mitch? He says, how much did this Penn State football team impress you, and what were your thoughts on Drew Aller's gameplay?
Well, look, I will say I think Kotelnicki's game plan, that they were taking shots. Like I thought what I was so interested, guys, to see what happened, because you know what this game started out a lot like? The Ohio State game. And I know that SMU is not Ohio State. I know that the Penn State coaches know that offensively and defensively. But I was so interested to see if they were going to regress back to what they did against Ohio State when the defense came out and was balling and got a pick six. Would they take the ball and run and hide? Aller hadn't looked good throwing the ball. I don't think he looked good throwing the ball the whole day at all, really. There were a couple plays to Tyler Warren in the intermediate where Warren was able to break a couple tackles and make plays. I don't think Drew Aller is national championship good. I don't think this Penn State team overall is elite enough on either side of the ball. Not saying they're bad, but offensively, and look, I know you'll play games out in California and you'll play some in a dome. Maybe it'll make it easier. I just don't think. What is the difference? What makes Penn State? David, I want to ask you this. I think Notre Dame's better than Penn State.
I was about to say that.
Because what makes Penn State better than Notre Dame? Who would you? I would take Riley Leonard at quarterback. I mean, I don't think Drew Aller's terrible, but he's not an elite runner. He's kind of that, he's kind of like zero sugar Josh Allen a little bit, just slower and not as talented.
Everybody's zero sugar Josh Allen. Basically.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. But then again, as a passer, dude, yesterday was bad. He just looked indecisive and nervous. And I don't know. I don't think he can lead him to a national championship.
Look, I think Penn State needs to play their best game in these biggest moments. Just like we saw, we just said it about the Buckeyes playing their best game in the biggest moment when they needed it. Penn State's going to have to do that for the remainder of this tournament. And that really goes for every team now that we're in championship football. But that's just how I feel about it. And I think that the team that represents that side of the bracket is either going to be Notre Dame or Georgia, even with their backup quarterback. That's how I feel right now.
No, I agree. All right, let's preview some of these games, fellas.
All right, let's start with the Rose Bowl. We get a rematch from in season. This is Oregon 13-0 taking on the Buckeyes, who we just saw in action yesterday, 11-2. The spread right now, the opening line, -1.5. Well, it opened -1, but -1.5 right now. Buckeyes, which I think is very interesting. Obviously, this one will be out there in Pasadena. Buckeyes are getting all the hype because of what we just saw yesterday, but Oregon's the only undefeated team in college football throughout the entire season. Who you guys going to take in this?
Quickly, that spread just went to -2.5.
I was about to say the same thing. It literally, Coney, while you were talking, I just saw it jump to 2.5 Buckeyes. The over's 54.5. Here's the question that everybody's going to be asking. And even before we get into the thick of schematically do this, do that, grab a wiffle ball bat, whatever. Is this the national championship? Is this game is this the best, the two best teams playing each other, right? If maybe you disagree, like in the chat, I want to know, in your mind, are these the two best? We see this in college basketball all the time, right? We get that Sweet 16 or Elite 8 matchup, and you're like, God, this may be the national championship, man, with the way these two teams are playing, even in the Final Four, right? Where we're like, well, this is really the national championship, and if UConn wins it, they're just going to absolutely obliterate whoever they play next, and that's how it's worked out. But, David, starting with you, are these the two best teams right now in your mind?
Well, maybe they're the two best teams. I don't know if this is a national championship for the reasons that we've just said. I mean, Georgia, Kirby Smart's got two of these things. That guy's going to figure out a way to dial up defensive plans to shut down anyone in the country when they really get motivated. Texas, I still think, is really good. And I'm not counting Notre Dame out of this thing. I think we're going to have a good tournament, man, despite what this opening weekend was. But I am really excited about this. Blaine, I want to ask you, do you think there's recency bias from the game yesterday in this line? Or do you think the Buckeyes are really going to be able to put that sort of performance together multiple games in a row?
I think, can two things be true at once? I will say this, like, you remember who Ohio State lost on the road at Oregon in this
by one,
and Dan Lanning had to put 12 people on the field. So, I will say, like, Oregon, from an offensive offensive standpoint, they match up well against Ohio State's defense because how you beat Ohio State is speed, right? You have to beat them with speed, and the weapons that Oregon has at the wide receiver and running back position, they have that. And you have Dylan Gabriel, right? Dylan Gabriel is good enough from a talent standpoint and a veteran standpoint to know what he's looking at, get the ball out quick, get it out on accuracy. The big thing I'm worried about is Oregon's defense. That's what I'm worried about. I saw Penn State move the ball up and down the field against you. Okay, I know, and look, I know what y'all did at Ohio State's defense when y'all are at Oregon. They're like, I get it. But it just feels like the more I look at this game, the more I like Ohio State. Like, I really do. There's a reason why this spread's going up. A neutral site game against Ohio State. It's going to be a hell of a football game for sure. The big question is can Ohio State run it like the way they did? Right? Can they manufacture that type of run game again against Oregon? Because if they do, if they can control the ball and get to Dylan Gabriel, I think they have a good enough roster to beat Oregon by a touchdown.
Well, David, if you remember, these teams have played each other, right? Which you can get a lot from that from a personnel standpoint. Now, schematically, they're going to go back, watch that film, build counters off things that they did, recopy, things that worked. But let's not forget, one of the things that helped Oregon a ton offensively, and Blaine, you're exactly right in that, you need speed to attack Ohio State. You need to be able to maybe supplement the lack of a run game with a quick passing game. And we know Will Stein in this Oregon offense, they're as good in the quick game and the intermediate game as anybody about getting the ball in space. But Evan Stewart was bombing Ohio State down the field. What opened up that run game where Jordan James went for 115 off 23 carries, even Dylan Gabriel popped for 32 on 4 carries, was Evan Stewart was running by people. And so they were hurting Ohio State on all 3 levels. That is the only way to consistently move the ball against this team. And you can do it in any order. You can do it short, long, middle, long, short, middle, short, long, long, middle, short. It doesn't matter. As long as you're able to affect all 3 levels, that's the only way to consistently move the ball. Here's a stat that's going to blow your mind. Last game, Oregon against Ohio State had 4 receivers, 4 that averaged over 10 yards a catch. Per catch. Evan Stewart had 7 for 150. I'm not a mathematician, but that's like 20 yards or something a catch. So when you're affecting them everywhere, they have to basically play you even or push all their chips on the table and say, damn it, we're bringing pressure and we'll play 1 or 0 behind it. Or we're going to give you a light box, which is what I think they're going to do. I think they're going to treat Oregon kind of like they treated Tennessee and say, you know what? We're going to give you a running box. Let's see if we can bait you in to not hurting us down the field or not even spitting the ball to Tez Johnson on the bubble or on the hitch or on the sit or on the arrow or whatever they do. But I'm telling you guys, an X factor in this game, Dylan Gabriel's legs, right? His ability to move within the pocket and outside the pocket can help them. But David, if you're Ohio State, you're looking at it going, well, Jeremiah Smith had 9 catches for 100 yards and a touchdown. Egbuka had 10 catches for 93 yards and a touchdown. So you threw for 326.
How much did the Buckeyes rush for in that one?
They ran for 141.
And how much did Oregon rush for?
155.
Wow. Okay.
So
pretty even. Oregon's success down the field was the most surprising part of that first game in the middle of the season, so much so that we were talking about Denzel Burke lost a lot of money, right? Now, what you're describing with Oregon's ability to affect you on any snap and any down and distance. Let's just keep in mind, too, any down and distance, they can affect you at multiple levels of the field is what Tennessee wanted to do yesterday, but was unable to. Right? Like that's their style of offense too. Oregon just goes about it in such a different way with all of these weapons. I'm even surprised that they rushed for 150 in that game because like we always talk about, they supplement that run game with the quick passing game. The question for me for the Buckeyes on offense, can they do the same? I mean, can they live with Jeremiah Smith coming down on tunnel screens and now screens to be able to set up deep passes like we saw yesterday without that ultimately opening up the run game. See, that opened up the run game beautifully yesterday, and
Yeah.
TreVeyon Henderson was able to have one of his better games of the season. But we talk about TreVeyon Henderson and Quinshon Judkins like they're two of the best running backs in the country for a reason, but there's been a lot of games this season where they hadn't really played like that. Do the Buckeyes need to have a rushing attack consistently in this game to be able to beat Oregon? That's a question I don't know the answer to yet.
Jake, it's hard for me to think about you can beat Oregon from sideline to sideline. I think they're too fast on defense to do that. Oregon is a type of team to where if you want to beat them, you have to pound the ball directly at
from the jump, or can you open that up like we've seen of the Buckeyes pass to run?
If I'm Oregon, I'm the same way. I'm daring you to run it. I am daring you to run the ball. I'm not getting beat by that thing outside.
Yeah. Well, okay. So all right. I get what you're saying, Blaine. I get that you're saying that, but to me, like saying, all right, we're not going to get beat by the wide receivers. So how are you playing it? Are you going? Are you playing with a light box and shading to Jeremiah Smith? Are you playing too high the whole game? Because here's what Chip Kelly is going to do. Because Oregon's good on defense, they're not elite. Right? They've got a good defensive line, Birch. They've got some nice players. Here's what Chip Kelly is going to do. He's going to say, okay, let's get in 10 personnel or 11 personnel where I can flex the tight end and then bring him back in if I want to. If you're going to play too high, that's great. We're going to go wide splits. I'm going to run Q power. I'm going to run Q counter. I'm going to get that extra hat in the box. Hell, I may put G. Scott or somebody at running back to lead block for it, and then I'm going to get you out of it. And then when I get you out of it, that's when I'm going to pull your pants down. But also, Blaine, if I'm going to sit here and say, all right, well, I'm going to stop the pass. So how are you going to treat me on the outside? Are you going to keep everything in front? Are you going to play off? Are you going to press me? Are you going to press bail me? Because just because you say, all right, we're going to play too high and play off coverage, I'll throw the bubble all day. I'll throw the slant all day. I'll run mesh. I'll run high-low op. I'll run drags against you with Jeremiah Smith. That's all Ohio State did yesterday. They're like, all right, Jeremiah Smith, let's go. We're going to run a drag. You don't want to put somebody on them? You want to play everybody back? Right? That's fine. We'll just run a drag. So how would you attack? That's what I'm saying.
Well, one, if I can keep everything in front of me, I think that's a great start. And look, if you want to run your quarterback, that's fine. Run him. I'm going to tag his ass every time he runs. Every time he runs, I'm going to hit him and hit him and hit him and let that wear and tear gain up a little bit and a little bit throughout the game. If you want to put your quarterback in that type of situation, that's fine. I'll do that. And how much do you trust your guys in space? How much do you trust your guys in space to be able to make the tackles? Tennessee had guys there. They had guys there. They just couldn't come up and make a tackle.
I don't think Oregon's tackling better than Tennessee in space against these cats.
Well, the only person I can say that is the guy who's coaching the defense. How much do you trust your guys? Because I know one thing. If they get behind us, it don't matter. We're not tackling them.
Well, is there any concern, Cone, is there any concern if you're Oregon and you say, all right, that's fine. We'll let you methodically take the ball down the field and then maybe try and tighten up in the red zone. Sure. Maybe it's a bend but don't break situation. But what happens if Ohio State goes, okay, that's fine. We're getting what? 5 yards a pop, 5 yards a carry, starting at our own 25. That's fine. We'll limit your possessions. We'll take 9-10 minutes off this clock. Like, how worried are you about that if you're Oregon about just not getting the ball enough?
I still think Oregon's going to be aggressive on defense. The one thing that concerns me, and Blaine brought this up, is the way that Penn State was able to score in the second half against Oregon and really keep that game close. That's one of the things that concerns me. But again, that was, they saw the flow of the game. I think they thought they had that game in hand. It's just one of the things that I'm thinking about. This is one of the few playoff games where I do like the over, though. It's sitting at 54.5. I like the over. I think both of these teams can score points, and they're going to hit big plays down the field. Even if the game restricts in the red zone a little bit, these offenses are good in the red zone for a lot of the reasons we talked about on Huddle Up last week. The way that Oregon's able to dial you up, the way that Chip Kelly's able to dial you up in the red zone, high and low red zone, they're great play callers.
Well, the red zone's probably what it's going to come down to. Like you said, both these teams are going to be able to move the ball in between the 20s. That third down, yeah. So, I mean, it's going to be a heck of a matchup. I can't wait for it. But, Coney, what's another one we got?
Next one up is the Sugar Bowl. This is Georgia and Notre Dame. The line opened at -1.5 Notre Dame, but right now it's -1.5 Georgia, and the point total is 44.5. That's low. Do you still like the under in this one? Because I kind of do.
Well, so we're assuming Gunnar Stockton's going to be the guy, right?
He's going to play quarterback. Yeah.
So if you're Notre Dame, you realize that the run game is your strength. It's what you're the best at. So it's what you're going to do the most, especially against a Georgia defense that's very fast, that's very talented, that having that quarterback run game, like we just talked about with Will Howard, gets you that extra blocking hat in the box. Right, to be able to supplement, not just going base against them and having that extra guy. On the Georgia side, you've got your backup quarterback. He's a better runner than Carson Beck. How much do you trust him throwing it? You're probably going to run the ball a lot, which means that this clock is going to be flying, and I can understand why you would take the under. I can understand why people started betting Georgia the minute Georgia was an underdog. Here's where I want to caution Georgia fans in this game. To all the Georgia fans that are saying, well, Gunnar Stockton's better than Carson Beck. You don't know that. You may end up being right. Maybe he comes out and he just absolutely balls. I don't know. But if you're sitting here saying Gunnar Stockton is better than Carson Beck, you're saying two things. One, you think that sample size, which he had some errors too, including almost throwing the game and the season to Texas in that second to last drive. So you have a small sample size compared to a big sample size with Carson Beck. So I don't like that. And then the second thing off is you're saying Kirby Smart is stupid. That's what you're saying. Kirby Smart is so stupid that he's been playing the wrong quarterback this whole time. For 2 years, he's been playing the wrong quarterback. So either you're smarter than Kirby Smart, which I don't think you are. I'm not. I don't think you are either. Or you're just guessing. So we'll see. But as far as the way this game's going to go, it's going to be run, stop the run. Who can hit those 3 to 5 big plays? Who's got the balls to call 2 to 3 trick plays to try and score? And then who can make field goals? That's what I think this game's going to come down to. I think it's a pick 'em for a reason. I actually like Notre Dame early right now, thinking about it. I haven't officially made my pick. I mean, we filled out our brackets, and I got Notre Dame beating Georgia, but I still don't feel great about it. But I tell you what, man, schematically, if you're Georgia and you're Bobo, I mean, Blaine, how close to the vest do you call this offensively? Early, you're going to play it close, right? Just to see maybe if we can get away with vanilla ice cream at the kid's birthday party this year.
Well, you look, I'm more of a chocolate ice cream guy myself, but the one thing I won't do, and I've made this mistake before and I won't make it again. If there's anybody who I trust, all right, it's that guy with the bowl haircut who wears a visor, all right, in Athens, Georgia, in big football games. I think this game's going to come down to which quarterback can make the big plays. Jake, I agree with you, not only with his feet, but who can actually throw it with consistency. All right, Riley Leonard, he's been good throughout the year. He's had some struggles, but we think he's getting better and better. I promise you right now, Notre Dame, that those 98-yard touchdown runs you just saw against last week, that ain't happening.
Yeah. Those are 10-yard gains.
Yeah, congrats. You got 12.
That ain't happening this week.
You got a first down.
Yeah.
It's just not. But I will say this. This Georgia defense has been inconsistent this year. We're not used to seeing that from a Georgia defense. And the one thing that does hurt Georgia is quarterbacks who are mobile, right, who can extend the plays and make a guy miss and go get a first down. And if there's anybody who can do that, that's Riley Leonard, all right? But we just don't know enough about Gunnar Stockton. Say what you want about Gunnar, all right? You can say what you want about him. I know he made that terrible throw, but damn it, he came in and won the game.
Yeah.
He came in and got the job done when pressure was at its highest. I mean, in overtime, got the job done. I think if you're
took a shot too.
If you're Mike Bobo, you got to trust this guy. You have to trust this guy, because if you don't, if you dip your toe in the water, that's a recipe for losing to me. Okay.
Well, they're going to trust him. They're going to trust him enough to run him out there and play quarterback, obviously. But I think that given the situation, you're going to see a vintage, quintessential Kirby Smart game plan on defense where he's telling his guys, I don't know what we're going to get out of the quarterback position. Hey, maybe Gunnar Stockton, the pride of Rabun County, ends up being the MVP of this game, or maybe he ends up being a liability. But I'll tell you this, if we don't allow any points, we can't lose the football game. That's what Kirby Smart's saying to his defense, and he's going to say whatever it takes, we're going to shut down the run. Riley Leonard is not going to run all over us. Make him throw the football. And if we lose to Notre Dame because Riley Leonard threw the football through the air effectively and we were bad on offense, then that's just what it have to take. We'll get ready for 2025. But you have to make him throw the ball. And I think Kirby Smart saying if we make Riley Leonard throw the football 35 to 40 times a game, then we're going to win.
Yeah, and so here's where I want to go with this, because, guys, we do have a common opponent here in Georgia Tech. How much, if I'm Notre Dame, am I sitting here after playing Georgia Tech? So I got that film. It's going to be fantastic. Then breaking down the Georgia Tech film. How many times am I going to replicate or try to replicate the way that Georgia Tech attacks Georgia with Haynes King, with Riley Leonard? So
quarterback counter.
Yeah, quarterback counter, all that stuff. And I know Kirby knows that's coming, but just because you know it's coming doesn't mean you can stop it. It's like the Taliban when we decided to blow them up. You knew we were coming, but you guys were dead anyway. So when I look at Blaine brought up the point, and this needs to be hammered home. Who has caused Georgia problems? When you go through Georgia's schedule, when you look back at it and look back at the games where really they've given up the most points, and I understand that they shut out Clemson and Cade Klubnik that can run, but you gave up 41 to Bama, all right, running quarterback. You gave up 31 to Mississippi State with Van Buren, running quarterback. You gave up 28 to Ole Miss, running quarterback with Jackson Dart. You gave up 42 to Georgia Tech with a running quarterback. What did Texas not have? A running quarterback. When did Texas score one of their only touchdowns against Georgia in the SEC championship? When Arch Manning went in there. So you don't have to be Nostradamus to realize that, look, Notre Dame, there's nothing left to hide. Like, there's nothing left to save any bullets for. You got to empty the clip on this one. So why would I not, knowing that Georgia's got a backup quarterback over there, say, you know what, guys? We are going to run the ball until they prove they can stop it with the quarterback and then take a couple shots deep. That's what I would do. That's where Georgia struggles. But Cone, the havoc plays, I'm going to go back to this. We talked about this with Kevin Jennings. We talked about this with all these running quarterbacks. Can Riley Leonard make those goofy-ass havoc plays that, shakes one guy and makes another one miss and takes off and runs for 35 or wiggles his way out of a tackle and runs for 13 to 15 yards? Can he do that against Georgia? My answer, I think so.
Well, obviously he can. Will he, though? I mean, Riley Leonard will throw you the football. He'll turn the football over too. And when I keep having these defensive performances for Kirby Smart against Texas, and I understand what you're talking about with mobile quarterbacks, but that's still Quinn Ewers, who we just saw light up Clemson. That's still Steve Sarkisian calling plays, and they were bringing in Arch at times. And Kirby Smart pitched really a perfect game. 2 different performances there. So look, I'm expecting a defensive battle, a stalemate, and can Riley Leonard sort of break free and not make those mistakes? Like, he's going to have to put the football in his hands on the ground and through the air for 4+ quarters. Can he do that consistently without having that big interception play like we saw against Northern Illinois that cost you the game?
Well, I will say this. I would feel a lot better as a Notre Dame fan if I'm down 10 than I would a Georgia fan. Because I think Riley is good enough to bring you back. I just don't know if Gunnar Stockton.
Well, Blaine, let me ask you this. If you're Al Golden, who's a savant defensively, by the way, I just love watching that man operate. How are you, when you look at this Georgia team, they're going to go out a lot of personnel with a tight end, right? Especially with a backup quarterback like Gunnar Stockton, especially with a guy like Gunnar Stockton that is a run threat. Are you kind of worried about maybe putting all your eggs in the basket of stopping the run and giving him a chance to hurt you? I just go back, Cone, to the Ohio State loss to Michigan a couple years ago, where Michigan couldn't throw the ball, and Jim Knowles said, okay, we're going to go zero coverage. We're going to put everybody that's ever went to Ohio State in the box, not just to match personnels, but overload personnels. Does Notre Dame need to be a little careful of that, Blaine, going into this game defensively?
Well, I look at it like this. Who scares you on the outside for Georgia? Who really – Georgia doesn't have that guy this year.
Well, Nia Smith can't catch.
I mean, they don't – they lead the nation in drops. Brock Bowers isn't out there. All right, Ladd McConkey isn't out there. George Pickens isn't out there. The one thing that has hurt them is not having that weapon on the outside. So, look, if I'm Notre Dame, you got to prove it to me. You're going to have to prove to me that Gunnar Stockton can throw the football. I am loading the box. If you want to take your shots, take your shots. That's fine. I'm forcing Gunnar Stockton into half to throwing the football. That would be my game plan. Why wouldn't you? I'd be the same thing with Riley Leonard. Both of these game plans should be the same on defense.
And here's a huge coaching point. How do you protect, and Cone, I think you can speak to this too, having played the position. You got a backup quarterback in there. How do you protect him on third and passing? 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10 plus. You give him a lot of easy throws. What's one of the easiest throws? Screens, right?
Roll him out.
So roll him out, sprint him out, screen him out, all that stuff. So if I'm Notre Dame, yes, I'm saying, hey, we got to stack this thing up on 1st and 2nd down to get in 3rd and 9. Great. That's awesome. Let's do it. But understand when you get to 3rd and long, and we're always screaming screen draw as a defense on 3rd and long. Hell, watch the live stream that we did with Notre Dame and Indiana. About half of America did anyway. We're screaming screen draw on every 3rd and long because we know it's coming even with your starter. But when you're having to protect a guy, that's when you're going to get those screens, whether it's the quick screens, the now screens outside, whether it's bubbles, whether it's slips, whether it's tight end delays. They're going to find easy ways for him to get the ball out that doesn't put them in danger on 3rd and passing, as opposed to saying, hey, man, get in that 5-step drop, dial in through your 3 reads, and hammer it in there if you got to in between the levels.
And two, I'm just wondering too, when it comes to Georgia's run game, how much of this is, you know what, guys, we're going to make running the football a priority. It's the only thing we care about in this game. We're going to rush against Notre Dame for over 200 yards. We don't care who we put at quarterback. We're going to snatch their soul from start to finish and run it down their throat and dare them to stop us. Yeah. It's one thing to have that game plan. It's obviously another thing to execute it. But would anyone be surprised if this game played out and it's all of a sudden it's like, man, Georgia really made a commitment to run the football and they did it and this thing was never close? That could happen too.
Yeah, no, it could, but like
we haven't seen it this season. But just like I haven't seen the Buckeyes get off to a hot start and just mop somebody from start to finish. Well, I saw it yesterday.
Yeah, well, it just I'm this Notre Dame defense. I just again, like you see it. Like, you know what time the train's showing up. Mm-hmm. You know which way the train's going to go. It's just, is it as simple as if Notre Dame stops the run, they win the game?
I don't know if it's that simple, but that's a great place to start. Yeah, let's start there if you're Notre Dame.
That's very true.
All right, 2 more bowl games here. Let's go to the Fiesta Bowl. Penn State 12-2 taking on the Fiesta Bowl killer boys. Boise State getting that first round bye. However you feel about it, talk about it in the chat. But right now, minus 10.5 Penn State. What's Boise State got to do to pull the upset in this game?
Well, so if Penn State offensively plays the way that they played against SMU, especially early, I think Boise State can win this game. But the problem to me is I think that Boise State is the most one-dimensional team in this playoff.
You think so?
I think they're the most one-dimensional team in this playoff. And let me explain to you exactly what I mean by that, because I think a lot of people would just assume that I mean the run game and that's it. And I'm just talking about the offense. When I look at this Boise State team, I don't buy into now Ashton Genty's going to play hard because he's pissed that he didn't win the Heisman. Ashton Genty was going to come in this game and try and ball anyway. Like, that's not the issue. Here's where I think Boise State is incredibly one-dimensional. I don't think their defense is that great. Now, listen, I understand they beat UNLV 21-7. UNLV's nice on offense. But in this style of game, can Boise State get away with not having a great defense because Drew Aller's struggling to throw the ball? And, Drew Aller's kind of got a little bit of sneaky running ability. It's almost like you watch him and you're like, this dude's goofy. There's no way he's going to get out of this. And then he gets out of it. I mean, there was a play on the sideline yesterday against SMU where he actually made a nice move to cut back inside and pick up a first down on 3rd down. So to me, I think a lot more has to go right for Boise. But if I'm a Boise State fan or player, what excites me the most is SMU's D-line kind of got after Penn State's ass a little bit on offense. So I don't think this is a dominant Penn State offensive line, or that the advantage up front is as massive as what some people think. What I worry about is what we saw with Kevin Jennings and SMU. If you're not able to run the ball with Genty, which we've seen a couple times this year, and you can bet your bottom dollar Penn State, you talk about stopping the run, they're good enough to do it as good as Ashton Genty is. Will Maddox make those same mistakes? Will Maddox turn the ball over? I mean, his QBR is 75-70. He's a good player. He's got some witch in him. But if it all falls on him, can he – because I think Penn State eventually the dam will break with Allen and Singleton running the ball against Boise State. I don't know if that dam will break for Penn State defensively. Even, if Boise State's not able to run the ball, can Maddox-Madsen make them pay? So, I don't see it.
Blaine, I think all of us are in agreement that Boise State just can't turn around and hand the ball to Genty every single play and then beat Penn State, right? Like Maddox-Madsen's going to have to make some plays. What the ratio of run to pass and all that is, and him creating with his legs, like that's what we'll have to see. He's had a solid year and hasn't turned the football over. But in that one game against Oregon, which that's the best team they played, and that's the team that's comparable to Penn State, he was 17 of 40 for 148 yards, 42.5 completion percentage. Does that worry you at all for Boise State?
Yeah, it does. Look, I'm gonna sit here and be honest. I think Boise State's about to get their ass kicked. I really do. I think Ashton Genty is a great football player, but this isn't Nevada. All right, this isn't UNLV. Okay, if anything, Drew Aller might not be great at throwing it, but I promise you, the things that they have running around on the field, y'all haven't seen before, except for I guess you could say Oregon. But I think Penn State's defensive line and front seven is a lot better than Oregon's. I'm worried because I agree with what Jake said. If Boise State becomes one-dimensional, there's no escaping, right? Sooner or later, Penn State is going to lean on you, come out in heavy personnels, and just run it right at you. It's almost a type of thing to where, which is crazy to say, and somewhere in my mind, I can see Boise State winning. At the same time, I can see them losing by 24. I don't know how exactly that correlates or how exactly that happens. It's just you don't have enough up front on both sides of the ball. Like, unless Drew Aller blows the game.
Yeah.
Unless Drew Aller
which is possible.
And throw 3 interceptions at the worst times possible, I don't see how Boise State matches up front. There's a reason why this game's 10.5, which is a worse spread than the SMU game. Madsen is going to have to make a lot of plays. And at the end of the day, you're going to have to be able to run the ball. If you can run the ball with Ashton Genty, all right, you're going to have a chance. But if I'm Penn State, I am loading the box. And I'm putting it. I feel good about our corners. I feel good about our safeties matching up with what Boise State has. And I am putting it on Madsen to beat me. If Penn State loads the box, Boise State loads the box, I trust Penn State a lot more in their run game with that 1-2 attack. They have a running back to get downhill and go get 4 and 5 yards and stay on schedule.
Well, and David too. Like we talk about this with Arizona State, and I think there's some parallels here. Mm-hmm. Like Ashton Genty, just like Scatabo is the spirit animal of Arizona State. That's who Genty is for Boise State. Sure. Like he's like the litmus test. Like if he's cooking, it's like everybody comes along. What happens if they're shutting him down? Like to go back to the point about turnovers, David, that you brought up, which is a really good one. Kevin Jennings had only turned the ball over 3 times in one game outside of Penn State.
That's a great comp.
And it was against Duke. Right? It was against Duke on the road in a game they won. Crazy game, 28-27 in overtime or whatever. Outside of that, he didn't turn the ball over multiple times through the air the whole year. Maddox has been even better before this game. But, guys, Kevin Jennings is an elite runner. He's an elite runner. Better runner than Maddox. And I know the way that college does, they put sack yards into rush yards, which is stupid. He had negative 25 yards against Penn State. So let's just play this out. If the run game is not working with Genty, Maddox-Madsen is not going to be able to run around this Penn State defense. If Kevin Jennings can't run around him, Maddox-Madsen is not running around him. So that means he has to beat them through the air. All right, so now you've really, really narrowed it. You've turned it from both runs being denied, quarterback and running back, to now we just have to throw the ball and hope that it works out. That is not a good way to go through life, even if your defense is – here's what would scare me if I'm Boise State. This is the nightmare scenario outside of just getting drugged. It's that our run game isn't working. We can't move the ball on offense. Our defense is playing their butts off and keeping us in the game for a quarter and a half. A little bit kind of like SMU, but eventually that dam breaks. Even if Drew Aller throws the ball away a couple times, eventually Singleton or Allen is going to start hitting. And it's going to be like water against concrete, right? Over time, that crack develops. Then all of a sudden, the wall's breaking down at once. That's what would worry me the most. So that's why when I look at this game, I feel like the path is so narrow for Boise, and it's really just Ashton Genty's got to set everything else up. And if he doesn't, it's not going to work.
Well, right now the point line is at 52.5. Now, I like the under. Obviously, what worries me most is like Penn State just kind of goes dumb against Boise State's defense, and you got a 48-10 sort of game. I think that's more likely than, say, a 33-21 type of game. But do you guys like the under right now with just how much these teams like to run the football and the percentage chance that Penn State either could make it ugly, or if it's close, it's most likely a low-scoring close game?
I like the under, Blaine. I just think that, if Kotelnicki realizes, hey, kind of like this game against SMU, we're rocking them on defense. The run game is working. I don't want to give Aller a chance to screw this up. Like maybe they're like, look, we'll get out of here with a 27-10 win. We'll get out of here with a 24-7 win. That's kind of the way I see this game going. I actually think, David, this game may look a lot like the Indiana-Notre Dame game. That's what I think it may look like.
Blaine, you like the under?
To be honest, I like the over.
Why is that?
I think right now the total points for Penn State is 31. I think Penn State will be able to score maybe 40 points in this game. Because I do think once Penn State gets ahead, I think Boise State will start pressing. And when Boise State starts pressing, what happens? Mistakes happen. Not only certain mistakes, but big mistakes. I can see pick sixes in this game. And I can just see Penn State overperforming than what a lot of people think. And I think Boise State will put some points on the board, right? I could see a 17 or a 21 or a 24 from Boise State, but I just don't know how, even if you do load the box, the Penn State has players on the outside. I mean, Tyler Warren, I don't know if there's a guy on Boise State who can solo tackle Tyler Warren. So I would somewhat play the over here. I bet it goes down. If you can get this at 50.5, I'd play the over because I think Penn State's going to score a lot more points than what people.
It's a really good point about if Boise State finds themselves behind early, they're going to have to throw themselves out of that deficit, and that's not their game. So that is something to watch. Let's talk about this last bowl game matchup here. This is the Peach Bowl. This is Texas 12-2 taking on Arizona State 11-2. Arizona State obviously got that first round bye after winning the Big 12. It's the biggest spread of the bunch, boys, minus 13.5 Texas, and the point line right now is 51.5.
This, if you're an Arizona State fan, you're thrilled to finish in the top four. What an accomplishment. You get the bye. That's awesome. This is probably outside of Ohio State. I mean, maybe even Oregon too, but I think Oregon you could run the ball against. This is probably the worst matchup stylistically that you can have. Because I think not that Scatabo is going to be totally shut down. He is the spirit animal of this team, like I just mentioned with Genty. But I think Levitt's going to have to throw you to a win in this one. And he can spin it. But this is where not having Jordan Tyson just guts you. I know they've had some other guys step up, but just at least having that one threat that Texas has to go, all right, Barron, all right, Taft, like this is the guy that we've got to stop. They don't really have that. So Texas, and I'm sure Pete and them won't funnel a bunch of resources early to stop the run because we know Arizona State's going to feed Scatabo, and they should. Levitt's going to keep it on the zone read, RPO action, stuff like that. I just think this is like one of those games where you're a team in basketball that's really good in the front court. Your center's big. He's talented. He can score his back to the basket. It's kind of like the old Purdue teams where they weren't great at guard, but they got those monsters down low. But then they run into a team that also is the greatest defensively down low, and they can score at guard. It's just a bad matchup, man. I just wonder, too, can Arizona State get to Quinn? Because when Quinn is protected, he is an assassin. He is an absolute assassin. when he is comfortable. And I just don't know, outside of sending hell and high water, if Arizona State's going to be able to consistently stop the run, get Quinn Ewers in passing downs, and get after Quinn Ewers from a front seven standpoint without having to bring pressure. I just feel like this matchup is a really bad one for Arizona State.
Blaine, what do you like in this game?
I think if it gets a plus 14.5 Arizona State, I'd take it. I mean, I look, say what you want. At the end of the day, Arizona State's got some gamers at quarterback. Got a gamer at quarterback. You have a gamer at running back. You had a couple wide receivers step up against Iowa State. You're going to have to put up some points in this game because I don't know if your defense is going to be able to stop Texas. I really don't. You're going to have to manufacture pressure against Quinn Ewers. You're going to have to make him get it out early. You're going to have to at least commit to something, whether that's stopping the run. You have to trick Quinn. All right. And we've seen Quinn get tricked before. Just how often can he do it?
But to trick, you got to set the tone.
Yeah. And I still think with Levitt's feet, right, and Scatabo, the way he runs the ball, they will have success on offense. I think they can create plays. I think 14.5 is a lot of points. I think Arizona State's got a bunch of guys who are gamers, who are veterans on that team. I think Texas is the better team, but I like Arizona State to cover.
I'll say the same thing about Sam Levitt playing Texas that I said about Cade Klubnik playing Texas. If running the football with Scatabo is hard sledding consistently, and it may be against this Texas front, Sam Levitt's going to have the football in his hand and make plays through the air and with his legs, which we've seen him do. We've seen him do against Big 12 teams. Can he do that consistently enough against Texas to open up some of the run game without making the big mistake? It's not good enough just to hit a 40-yard pass here or a 25-yard pass here or get a first down and you score a touchdown here, but then you throw an interception and it's a pick six, or strip sack fumble on 3rd and 12 and they take it to the house and you're down 14. And then for Arizona State on defense, can you take away anything? I mean, can you stifle their run game and not give up 292 yards rushing like Clemson did? That'd be a good start and at least make Quinn Ewers go beat you. Or do you just sit back in a shell and say, well, we're at least not going to let Quinn Ewers throw the football deep, but we're going to give up a lot of rushing yards in between the 20s and maybe we can restrict in the red zone. Can you do either one of those things? Because if Texas can run it and throw it against you, it's going to be an ugly day.
I'm gassing you up. If I'm Arizona State,
why not? That's what I do. I would just heat you up. I mean, you can't do it all the time in the game, but like when it matters, why not? What do I got to lose, right? Because here's what: if you go the route of, oh, we're just not going to get beat deep or let Quinn beat us, Sark isn't one of those greedy guys.
Yeah,
he will just give it to you. That's fine. Here's Wisner. I'll feed him like a fat kid at a cupcake factory. Just give him the ball just every single time. Boom. I would love for you to take it out of Quinn's hands. And then guess what? Then I'm going to play action you. Then I'm going to hit Gunnar Helmet tight end. That's what it would be. Running back, tight end. Running back, tight end. It'd be the do-si-do. So if I'm Arizona State, if I'm going to go down, I'm going down because I sent everybody through the hot gates. Like that's how it's going to be. But I'll go back to Arizona State and say the same thing I said about Boise State. And I think it's a fun argument to have between which quarterback would you take, Sam Levitt or Maddox Madsen, right? I think you could
take Sam Levitt.
Well, I think you would overall take Sam Levitt, but I think there's some things both of them do that help out their running back, right? With Scatabo wouldn't be Scatabo without Levitt. I don't think Genty would be as good, or if you didn't have somewhat of a run threat like Maddox Madsen has been. So it's a fun argument to have. But I'll say the same thing. What happens if Arizona State gets down 14 and you almost have to totally eliminate Scatabo from the offense and you don't have Jordan Tyson? So what is the answer there? You just going to throw swing routes? You going to put Cam Scatabo at slot, have him run slot fade or slants, try and beat the nickel inside? Like I see a lot of answers if things happen for Texas, right? Like if this doesn't work, then you have this. And if that doesn't work, then you could do this. And then if that works, then you can go back to this. With Arizona State, I'm like, if this doesn't work, oh God.
It has to work.
It has to work.
Arizona State is a very good comp for Clemson.
But no, they're not, though. No, they're not, though.
Don't they have doesn't Clemson have a better defense? Well, I say that, and they gave up 292 rush yards.
Clemson has a better defense, but Arizona State lost their best threat at wide receiver. They don't have Wesco. Yeah. They don't have some of the guys. The guys that Clemson had on the outside were making plays, buddy. They were making plays in that game down the field.
We're not used to – hell, Clemson only had Williams for most of the year do anything.
What? That's
now
so
you have-
no.
now you have a
That's
couple
false.
guys.
That's false.
Now you have a
That's
couple
false.
guys. We talked about Clemson all year not having that guy outside.
Clemson, one of the reasons Clemson was able to get back in this thing and make the playoff is because they had some of those young guys who, remember, they started against Georgia, and I was like, hey, look, starting against Georgia as a freshman, probably in the best way to go about it, that they've got guys with some numbers. So I'm pulling them up right here just to let you know. So you do have Williams. That was your leading receiver with 900 yards, right? Had 11 touchdowns. Wesco Jr., over 700 yards, had 6 touchdowns. TJ Moore, almost 700 yards, 5 touchdowns. Brining Stool at tight end, almost over 530 yards, 7 touchdowns. So they had weapons. That was that's why Cade Klubnik was able to put up the numbers that he was able to put up this year and almost break these records with Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson, is because finally, for the first time in a couple years, they had some guys on the outside. And guess what? They're freshmen. Wesco, freshman. I believe Moore Jr. Is a freshman as well. So, or not Moore Jr., but Moore in general. Yeah, freshman from Key West. So Arizona State, if they had Jordan Tyson, I'd be like, okay, use that guy that transferred from Penn State or wherever that you had to bring off a red shirt to make plays last week. But they don't have him. That's the problem.
I mean, did you watch the Iowa State game?
Yeah, what? Iowa State runs a 3. Iowa State's own defensive coordinator sat here and said the way that we're structured on defense, we are not going to stop the run very well. They lost that game because they got ran through by Scatabo and Levitt. Absolutely ran. It was not the passing game that won them that game. Even Iowa State's DC said we structurally are not built very good to stop what they do, which to me means I'd have probably done something a little bit different, as hard as that was in that game. At least the guy's honest. But those two, Clemson and Arizona State at wide receiver, are not the same. They're not the same.
I saw 2 guys that I was pretty damn impressed with when it came to, I thought Stovall was a great player. I thought he's going to be a good piece in this, making one-on-one catches throughout the entire game. Almost had 100 yards. And that McLean kid is nice enough to make plays on the outside.
We'll see.
Yeah, and look, another reason you want to run the ball is not just because Scatabo's your best player, but that's going to chew a lot of clock too and limit possessions for Texas. So if Arizona State's not able to do that, right, like you don't want to lengthen the game any and help Texas and Steve Sarkisian have more play calls than necessary.
Well, it's and David and Blaine, I think you'll agree with me here that as much as we just talked about the Arizona State offense being questionable, I think that's the most reliable thing you got coming in this game.
I agree.
Like, I trust Arizona State's offense more than I trust their defense, Blaine.
I mean, yeah. I mean, obviously, because you have Cam Scatabo and Sam Levitt. I mean, you have to absolute. I mean, what guys on defense you look at and like, hey, man, I'm really impressed with this guy. Look, you have to be when it comes to Arizona State, you have to be a bend but don't break defense. All right. How many times can we give up 3 and not 7?
Yeah.
All right. How many times can we get Quinn in 3rd and 5+ to make Quinn make an actual play, and we can actually send bullets from different angles and guys to try to trick them? You're not just going to line up and bully Texas. It's not going to happen. Yeah. I promise you it's not going to happen. You just have to find a way to trick them.
Very true. All right. Well, we got a couple more minutes, then we're going to get off here. Want to thank everybody for hopping in, but let's get to the chat, Blaine.
All right. I got a couple donations here. Let's go to a $5 donation from Ty. Appreciate it. Talking about Georgia having problems against mobile quarterbacks. Has Notre Dame played a defense like Georgia this year?
Texas A&M would be the most comparable.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think there's still a lot. Even the Notre Dame fans. I mean, David, we talked about this with Brian Driscoll when he was on. Like, them beating Indiana is not going to convince even the Notre Dame fans.
Yeah.
Like, this team is really good. Even though Georgia is a backup quarterback, we're going to find out about Notre Dame. Mm-hmm. Now we're really, really going to find out. And that, I think it's a great opportunity for Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Don't you want this? You wanted this to be able to get over the hump. And what a better way to get over the hump than playing a team whose mascot's a dog.
True.
Let's go to a $2 donation from ND Milton fan. It says best matchup to Georgia with physicality would be Notre Dame, correct?
God, I just it's hard for me to not look at, well, from a physicality standpoint. Like, are we talking about like who's just the toughest? I think Texas is pretty tough. Ohio State is physically gifted. I don't know how physically tough compared to some of these other teams that they are. I like the matchup. I hope it's a fist fight. So, I mean, I'm not going to say you're wrong, but I think that's debatable.
Let's go to a $5 donation from Tim. Appreciate it, Tim. SEC plays a real conference and gets dominated. Lane Kiffin, Chris Mahler, and the other SEC lovers are real quiet about Tennessee's domination, and Indiana and the real deal actually played better.
Cone, can I rant just for a second here?
As long as it's about Lane Kiffin, yes. Because if you don't, I will.
To all the people out there, one of the most hypocritical things that I see is that they say because of one game, oh, Tennessee got blown out by Ohio State, who's one of the top teams in the country. That means the SEC is overrated and the SEC sucks. Meanwhile, on the other hand, when your teams get beat at the beginning of the year in the non-conference and most of the time destroyed by an SEC team, all I hear is, oh, it's just one game. Oh, it's just one game. Tennessee played awful. Was the SEC elite this year? The best it's ever been? No. Did they have the best team in the country overall this year? Probably not. But that doesn't take away from the fact that the SEC has dominated over and over from a national championship standpoint through multiple teams. It's not just Bama. It's not just Georgia. It was Florida. It was LSU. It was Auburn. I can go down the list when compared to other conferences. So I am all for saying there's other good teams out there. There's other elite conferences out there. The SEC won't always be the best every year, but using one game that Tennessee played after Texas mopped Clemson, pretty much, people just forget about that. They didn't even say anything about that. I guess a lot of people realize Texas.
That's all I saw.
That's not what I saw. Not what I saw. But I'm so sick of it. And you know what? I am, though, to your point, Cone, I'm almost glad this happened. Just so Lane Kiffin and some of these other guys will just shut up. You'll just shut up.
You won't shut up.
For 5 minutes. You'll just shut up. You lost to Kentucky, dude. You lost to Kentucky. You lost 3 games. They looked at you and said, hey, with this easier schedule than pretty much anybody in the SEC, we'll give you 2 games. You play nobody in the non-conference. Absolutely nobody in the non-conference, and we'll still give you 2 conference losses. And you couldn't even do that. If I'm an Ole Miss fan, I know that Lane Kiffin is now like just who you are. Like it's the only thing that Ole Miss football is. More people know who Lane Kiffin is than know who Archie Manning is. Like he's now Ole Miss football. That's who he is. But even I would be sick of it. Bro, say what you want about James Franklin. His ass is here. Say what you want about Ryan Day. They just clocked Tennessee. Say what you want about some of these other coaches. Say what you want about Dan Lanning. He's here. You're not here because you're more worried about talking on Twitter than talking on the scoreboard. And I like you, dude. I think you're a fantastic, smart coach. But this looks so bad, and it makes you look little, and it makes the conference look weak, especially when you talk all that, and then Tennessee gets their pants pulled down and their ass spanked in front of everybody at church.
Well, the one thing in your rant that you're overlooking is the order of operations on this whole thing. So you had Tennessee lost first, and then everyone was talking trash about the SEC, and then the rest of the playoff played out the way it did. You'd be exactly right. But the opposite is what happened. We saw Indiana not play a competitive game against Notre Dame, so everyone started on Friday night that an 11-1 Big Ten team shouldn't have been in the playoff, right? Then we see SMU getting blown out by Penn State. Everyone says, well, Alabama should have been in. South Carolina, Ole Miss. I'm getting texts all day long about it. And then that's followed up with Texas beating Clemson handily and covering the spread and saying, look, the SEC put out a graphic yesterday bragging that 3 of their teams beat the ACC champ this year. I don't remember seeing them do that about the 2023 ACC champ when Florida State went 2-0 against SEC teams. They never talked about that. So it was 24 straight hours of everyone saying that 10 of the 12 teams, no, all of the 12 teams basically should have been SEC schools. And then that happened to Tennessee. So I think that's why fans are piling on now just to offset what I saw, which is basically no, Indiana at 11-1 shouldn't have been in. SMU shouldn't have been in. It should just be all SEC teams.
Well, and here's where it hurts the narrative because Tennessee beat Bama. So if you're a Bama fan, it's like, see, I told you we should have been in. Well, Tennessee beat y'all, and they just got throttled. That's why that one hurt as bad as it did. But the last thing I'll say about Lane Kiffin is this. That to me, watching Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin talk like this, you're like the kid who lost the fight badly, but then now you want to brag about how you would beat everybody else up.
Yeah,
That's what it's
yeah.
like.
You saw Dick Vitale got after him though.
Yeah, but like, dude, but listen. If you believe that, that's fine. But
why
like,
do y'all keep expecting Lane Kiffin to change?
I don't.
Well,
I don't.
I'm not,
and I'm not
expecting it.
necessarily
Doesn't mean I
saying
want
he's
to
bad
react
for
to
college
it.
football either. I'm not saying he's bad for
No,
college
I
football.
like
A
Lane.
lot of the things he complains about, he's right about with the transfer portal window.
Yes.
I don't like the way he goes about his business, and I'm not afraid to say
Lane Kiffin's a game show host who's really good at coaching offense.
Yeah, maybe that's true.
That's all the donations for today, guys. Redmo, some
wow, what a show.
Yeah. Hey, we appreciate everybody being in here. Look, we are rocking and rolling tomorrow, same time. 2 p.m. Central, not the same time as this morning. Hope you guys are gearing up, ready to have a very Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, however you celebrate it. But we really appreciate you guys joining us. Again, shout out to the team for setting the live stream up. Had over 140,000 views on that one, so really appreciate it, guys. Make sure you hit
300,000 across all the platforms. It was awesome.
Yeah, it was incredible, man. So you guys, we're gonna do another one too. So we got another one coming down the pipe. I'm almost glad we didn't live stream the Tennessee-Ohio State game now, because that
all worked out great.
It all worked
awesome.
out. But we
the hate
appreciate.
I caught about picking Ohio State. I don't see those people in here now.
Yeah,
Where are they at, B?
Yeah, where they at though?
It's
Where
amazing.
they at though?
Crane, all these bad takes. Yeah, buddy. Trust me, you talk about it. I get paid to talk about it.
Ooh, wow, mic drop. That's a strong word.
And a Merry Christmas.
Yeah.
I think it's a Die Hard night.
Idiot.
It's Die Hard night tonight, I think.
Oh,
it's
it
finally
is?
time.
It
I think
is?
so. It's
There's
December
nothing like watching a
22nd.
good summer movie during Christmas, right, Dave?
Hey, get out.
Let's go, Sam
All
Houston State.
We'll see you. Yeah,
You filthy animal.
Bye.